Ready.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming today. We're starting promptly. Want to welcome you to preparing for the final events part 2. For those who weren't here for part 1, we were exploring spiritual reasons for preparation for end-time events. Because, of course, no preparation outside of your relationship with the Lord is important if you don't have that first step right. Today, we are going to be exploring motivations for country living. We, of course, have a panel of guests who are going to share their wisdom and their journey. And a big thank you in advance to all of our speakers who are going to be with us today. So, out of the cities is our message. But why? Why should I sell my beautiful home in the suburban neighborhood that I live in, which is 20 minutes from the office and the kids' school, to move to the country? Well, hopefully we'll be able to inspire you to consider this today. I will say, when I came into the church, I didn't embrace our message entirely. I thought the health message was arbitrary, voluntary, and not part of salvation, and therefore not really important. But in time, I began to see the cause and effect role that food plays on our health, and slowly began to understand why God gave us guidelines for food. Slowly, I began to understand that if we eat food according to His instructions, we will be happier, healthier, and more energetic. So I had an epiphany that when God tells us to do something, it's for our best interest. And I had a thought exercise. Let's see. That I cut out. Let's pretend this circle is God. And this circle represents heaven. Now, most of us want to be as close to that center circle as possible, right? But what I find in my dealings with people on a regular basis is I find a lot of people trying to walk along that outside line. They say things like, God's not going to kill me or not accept me into heaven if I don't get dunked underwater. God's not going to kill me if I eat pork chops or crab legs. You know, I can walk along that edge. God's not going to kill me if I worship Him on a different day than He ordained, or if I'm not a vegetarian, or whether I live in the country. So it's a thought exercise because we don't want to walk along the peripheries. We want to get as close to the center of that circle as possible, right? So if God is in the center and hell is on the outside of that circle, we want to be all the way into the circle. So the epiphany, I'm a little slower than most people, the epiphany I had that is when God tells us to do something, it is for our good. It's not about heaven or hell, it's about what's best for us. But before we just walk out of this meeting today and go put in estimates on property out in the wilderness, there's some things to be considered. We don't want to be rash. We definitely want to, let's see if that's next. We definitely don't want to leave without prayer for wisdom and guidance. What we're going to discover in a lot of these testimonials is that prayer and guidance were essential parts of this journey that people had. You know, I think a lot of these speakers today are going to express the same kind of story where they didn't end up where they sought to end up, that God had a story for them to get where they are. Let's see, make sure I got my notes in order. No, I don't have my notes in order. Again, I did this last time too. I just dropped my notes and so yeah, let me go to this Proverbs then. So Proverbs 2, 1 through 5 says, "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commandments within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding," and that was the big epiphany that I had was, hey, when God tells us something, whether it's for eternity or not, the focus should be on heeding the counsel of God. So if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and as for hidden treasure, then you will understand and fear the Lord and find the knowledge of God. And that's what we want to do. So back to the question, why should we move out of the cities? There are, of course, end-time reasons, but even if Jesus' coming should be 100 years away, there's still really good reasons to move to the country. Out of the cities has always been his message. After the flood, the people congregated and built a city and a mighty tower in the middle, and it was not God's will that they were to do that. God called Abram out of the city. Lot chose to move into the city, and we know how that worked out with Lot. Even Jerusalem, which was a city for the people of God, was susceptible to wickedness as any other city. Elijah lived in the mountains. John the Baptist lived in the wilderness. And even John, the beloved disciple, had his own island. That was a joke. It was involuntary, but he still had his own island. Thank you. What should we do? Just some lists of priorities. We need to make our homes in the quiet. These are some quotes from Ellen White. And there's so many of them, but these are just a few of them, hopefully to inspire. Make your homes in the quiet retirement of the country, even if you can never become wealthy in so doing. So having our priorities straight. Get out of the cities into the rural districts where houses are not crowded closely together and where you will be free from the interference of the enemies. So that's going to be a problem in the end time, is the interference of enemies. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities and into the country where they can raise their own provisions. So there's a lot of reasons for leaving the cities. And as we go about this, we're going to be exploring more of these reasons. So why people should get out. To be separate. The cities are hotbeds of vice and sin. In nature, we are more able to see the work of our Creator. The air is pure. The work is healthy in gardening. If you live in subdivisions where houses are too close, imagine what it'll be like when every one of your neighbors thinks of you as the enemy. I know somebody who was in a retirement community. So the houses are all really close together. And he decided everything was great until one day COVID hit. And then sometime later, a vaccine came out. And he was one of those people who decided not to get vaccinated. And your opinion on that isn't that important. What is important is compulsory versus free choice. And this person, all of a sudden, was the pariah of his neighborhood. Going for walks around the neighborhood were almost dangerous for him. So that's just a small example of just how quickly your quiet, peaceful community can become your enemy overnight. And the last reason for us to consider is because he told us to get out of the cities. But here are some bullet points that we need to go over. Pray about it. We need to, of course, get out of the cities and learn to garden. That was in those quotes from Ellen White. So we are going to be hopefully continuing this process, and we'll give some tutorials in gardening from people who have expertise in those things. I found this very fortuitous. I believe there are no coincidences, but it felt coincidental. This is obviously God leading. Kayleen and I started putting these together last year. So before this first quarter came out on tithing, and to be honest with you, when I saw this quarterly, I said, oh, great. How are we going to talk about tithing for a whole quarter? But last week, it was just an amazing moment, because when we started talking about debt-free, that was part of this experience in moving to the country, is to be debt-free. And this quarterly is just talking about everything that is important about being debt-free. It is better to have a small and humble home that's paid for than a castle with a mortgage. And you don't want anybody to have power over you, whether it be a bank or a homeowners association. When it comes to those kind of associations, you're going to find that you're compromised in the end. There are some good things to consider. We've had discussions about property taxes. How am I going to pay property taxes when I can no longer buy and sell? Well, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy don't really say anything about that. So the only logical conclusion is if God is calling us to get out of the cities and into the wilderness, and there's no way to pay your property taxes ahead of time, then that must mean that that's not going to be a real important issue. That must mean that the little time of trouble is going to be so short that you're not going to lose your house to failure to pay property taxes before that happens. Now, they're not going to come and take your house in 1 year. It's a multi-year process. So I wouldn't look for that event, the first stages of Sunday law, to be something that stretches over a 10, 15-year period. I find that pretty comforting. But it would be prudent to pay them as quickly as you can when you get your property tax bill. Spirit of prophecy says that we will flee when the time of Jacob's trouble comes. So once that time comes, then your property, the taxes, none of that's really going to matter anyway. So these are just your temporary dwellings until that time, and of course, Jesus comes. Another thing to consider, there's stages to this. Debt-free is more important than being off-grid, and you see a lot of people today with all these elaborate end-time survival kits, and that's all great, but people have survived for thousands of years without power, and if in the last days you're in a position where you're lighting candles at night, so be it. If you have to open your windows, so be it. And another great thing about what we're learning here is that the closer you get to nature, the closer you get to God's true diet, the less you're going to find even a need for a refrigerator. So, you might find that all of these amenities, tractors and all this stuff, it's great to have all these tools, but if you don't have them, it's just fine. Jesus is coming soon, and all those who follow his wise counsel will find the doors are opening and obstacles will fall. And it begins, again, with prayer. So that is the step one. But now, enough of me. We're going to have Kayleen come and open us up in prayer, and then Eric Hickman was actually going to be our MC today, but he's sick, and Kayleen's going to take over those duties. So, Kayleen.
What should we expect from this afternoon? Well, we're going to hear stories, and it's going to be an interview style. And each group that comes up, they're going to share their testimony. And as you can imagine, every story can probably go for hours, but we only have a short period of time this afternoon. And so I would call this a taste of things to come for the future. We have about 9 individuals that will be up here this afternoon. So we're going to try to keep this as enjoyable as possible, but for what you're going to look forward to, you're going to hear stories about each person's experience of what God has brought them to do. And what we would like is, as we go through the year, each one of the speakers, as you've heard their testimony, you'll know them, and they will be able to share some of their expertise and things that they're passionate about. And Some of it may actually maybe be at someone's property. There's lots of opportunities. And so today we want to introduce the speakers, let them share their stories, and that they will inspire. And let's just keep in mind that everyone's experience will be different and that we just need to trust in God that He will lead us when He needs us to do something. And so with that, I'd like to invite you to bow your heads for prayer. Our Heavenly Father, please open our hearts and minds to receive what you want us to hear. Please give the right words and the power to each speaker that they will express the things that our audience needs to hear. Thank you, and we ask that you will bless this program, we pray in Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, I would like to welcome our very first group up. Come on up. And I'm going to, before you share your testimony, I would like for you both to introduce yourselves, tell us your names and your relationship to one another, and how did you come to be in fellowship with the Chestatee Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Roberto and Adriana Phillip, and we started coming to Chestatee approximately about 2 years ago. My mom's suggestion, you should always listen to your mother. We came here during COVID because the Romanian church was closed many times, and we loved the fact that everybody was singing, and they were not afraid to sing. Yeah. And praise God, and we kept coming back mostly because of all the friendly faces and friendly people, and like the pastor said during the sermon, because it made us feel like home. And my husband's going to tell you our story.
Okay, so let me get to that. So you've been on a country living journey for how many years?
About 15 years.
Okay.
But you'll see the story.
And that's what I want. I want you to share. How has God led you? What were the challenges? How did you choose your property? What did you do with doubt? What did you learn and perhaps are still learning?
Well, I want to go back to that question just for a second. I think it's more than 15 years. You know, I grew up in Romania, and even though I grew up in a town, I would go every week. We would go every weekend in the country. So I can't say that we started just 15 years. But for now, for an adult, you'll see how we got to where we are. But I want to point out something before I have a disclaimer. When you'll hear our story, there's a text in Deuteronomy 9:6 that says, "Understand therefore that the Lord thy God giveth thee not this good land to possess it for thy righteousness, for thou art a stiff-necked people." So I want to say that we are just a couple of sinners saved by grace. And if God can do this for us, He can surely do it for you. And why, some of you might have heard the story. I like to share this testimony all the time.
Yes,
Yeah. Because of this quote that says, "We have nothing to fear for the future except that as we shall forget the way the Lord has led us and His teaching in our past history." I like to give praise to God, because as you will hear, our story is quite, how to say it, miraculous, because that's how God works. Everything that He does is amazing. And lots of times things are very normal, but it's still Him that does it. So, and it was 2008, the economy was going down. There was a very strong feeling of things happening. We really believed that Jesus was coming very soon in 2008. How many of you remember the Great Recession? Right? How many of you remember the long lines at the gas station? In the United States, right? Not in other countries. So there were a few things that were very unusual. And at that time, we started reading Country Living, and there are two quotes that I want to read very quickly to you to see what are some things that inspired us to want to move in the country. And Jason actually pointed a few of them out, but these are a little bit the whole paragraph. It says, Adventist Home 137, it says, there is not one family in 100 who will be improved physically, mentally, or spiritually by residing in the city. Not one in 100. Are there 100 families here? So not one of us would benefit by living in the city. That's what she says. Faith, hope, love, happiness can far better be gained in the retired places where there are fields and hills and trees. Take your children away from the sights and sounds of the city, away from the rattle and din of the streetcars and teams, and their minds will become more healthy. How many of you want kids with healthy minds? Right? I mean, I think there is nothing we can add to that. It will be found easier to bring home to their hearts the truth of the Word of God. And when she wrote this, there were no cell phones. I wonder what she would say now. And then the second text is, again and again the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities, into the country. What's country? Where they can raise their own provisions. For in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one, and we are very, very close to that. We should now begin to heed the instruction given us over and over again. Get out of the cities into rural districts. And what's country? Where the houses are not crowded closely together, and where you will be free from the interference of enemies. So this is our mindset that we had. So in 2008, we had a great disappointment. We found a property in Tennessee we loved. And we had so much faith that we even had closing on it. But we had no money. We had no means. But we went by faith. It was 2008. Remember, the housing market went down. The banks wouldn't give loans anymore because they were losing all their houses, or they were getting back the houses. People were losing the houses. The banks were gaining them. But banks went bankrupt and so on. And there was no way for us to get it any other way. We went to the closing. We believed that God will make a miracles. Guess what happened? Nothing. And we were very disappointed. And this is the first lesson. Whenever you hit a disappointing experience, it's a learning experience.
Keep going.
And it hurts. Because you believe that God can, look at that. He can part the Red Sea. Can't he make it work for you when you go to the closing? And it didn't happen. So for 1 year, we didn't want to talk about it anymore. Anytime I would bring up the subject to moving the country, she said, I don't want to hear it. And it just happened that we worked in Tucker and we lived in Gwinnett. We lived in the city, believe it or not. And we would travel about an hour and 25 minutes to commute every morning, sometimes an hour and a half on the way back. So we listened to lots of sermons. It was December of 2009, 1 year later, after our great disappointment. And it happened that specific week, in all the sermons I was listening in the car, 3 of them were about country living. What coincidence? Somebody said that when there is a coincidence is when God decides to remain anonymous. 3 sermons about country living. The last one was this one. It's called Building the Ark. You can find it on YouTube. That's why I put it up there. If you want to take a picture of it, you will be amazed about the sermon. It's W.D. Frazee. W.D. Frazee was the founder of Wildwood Sanatorium in Georgia, which is past the Chattanooga. And he has a sermon called Building the Ark. You can find it in a book called Another Ark to Build, where he takes Noah's experience in building the ark and he shows what is our experience of building the ark in the last days, and that is moving in the country. Amazing sermon. So I get to work. My wife and I were working for the same company. So when I got to work, she was taking the kids to school. I gave her the sermon. I said, you have to listen to this. I didn't say, hey, what do you think about country living? I gave her the sermon. I said, you have to listen to this. So she listens to the sermon, and she says, I think we have to move in the country. I think we have to look again. I said, that's what I wanted to hear. This was probably on a Tuesday. And I said, no, do I have permission to look for land? And she said, go ahead, look for land. So I look online for land, and now where can we look for land? We are in Gwinnett, right? And I remember that a few years earlier, I happened to work in Jasper area. I did at that time construction, and I happened to work there for a couple of weeks. And I remember it is right where the mountains start. Now, here we have a disagreement. I call them mountains, she calls them hills, just so you know. I say that we live in the mountains, she says that we live in the hills. It doesn't make a big difference, but anyway. So I remember that. So I started looking at places in Jasper, and there are so many. It's just overwhelming. You know, like I went page after page on the website, online.
Not anymore.
Yeah, and now at that time, in 2009, nobody was buying because nobody could buy. Right? So I get to about 30th page, 30 pages, and on every single page there are so many lands, and I find one interesting thing. But let me say something. That sermon, go back to the sermon because there is something important. In that sermon, W.D. Frazee says that we have to build an ark big enough to have room for all the people that will come to find refuge on our place, that did not move out of the city early enough. He calls them refugees. The refugees are coming. Is your place big enough to house them? So the first for the first time, we started to think big. Until then, we were modest. Oh, God, we want 1 acre, 2 acres is enough, So for the first time, we started to think big. So I told my wife, let's look at the 10 acres. I think that's big enough to have everybody. So that was our standard at that time. So we found these 10 acres. I write an email to the realtor and say, hey, I'm interested in finding more information about this land. He answers back right away. He says, which one of them? Realtors, they have lots of properties, right? And I tell him which property, and guess what? That was 13 years ago. He never answered back. Now, what realtor does that? Anyway, so this was on a Wednesday, and I tell my wife on Sunday we go and look around to see how Jasper is. Now, Sunday morning comes, and we do our worship separate. I go and I pray. And for the first time, I make a very specific prayer. Very, very specific prayer. And I pray, Lord, help us to find a land that is at least 10 acres, has water on it, and has wood on it. And while I was praying, was on my knees praying, my wife was studying in the other room. And she prayed and she said, please talk to me with the next chapter that comes in my daily reading. Guess what her chapter was that day?
Deuteronomy chapter 8.
Deuteronomy 8. And she was reading, while I was praying, she was reading this chapter, and I'm going to show you what she was reading. And she started weeping. And she came in the room, and I was still praying. Some of us, we take longer to finish speaking, even to God. Like he doesn't know what we have to say. And then she comes and finally we talk and she says, this is what God showed me in my reading. And let me read to you. It says, in the entire chapter, there are 3 verses that are very interesting. Now remember what I was praying about. It says, for the Lord thy God bringeth thee into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and depths that spring out of valleys and hills. A land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, and a land of oil, olive, and honey, a land wherein thou shalt eat bread without scarceness, thou shalt not lack anything in it, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills thou mayest dig brass. When thou hast eaten and art full, then thou shalt bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he has given thee. I mean, what do you think? Coincidence, isn't it? Remember, coincidence is when God decides to remain anonymous. I mean, I was praying very specific, and then God gives an answer very specific. And when I read that, I said, that's it. We don't have to stay any longer. We can get in the car and go and look for it. So we get in the car, and we put on the GPS to take us to Jasper, because we didn't know exactly how to get to Jasper. I mean, who knows how to get to Jasper, right? Anyway. So we put it on the GPS, and we start driving. And we drive, and we follow GPS for the longest time, right? And then, there's a text that says, Isaiah 30, verse 21, and thine ear shall hear a word behind thee saying, this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right hand and when you turn to the left. At one point, I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm impressed that we should turn to the right. The GPS was saying to go straight, right? So we turned to the right, and then left, and then right, and then left, and all of a sudden, we stopped the GPS, and we just followed the impressions. I'm not telling you should do that. This is our story. This is how God worked with us. So we drive, and we go in the mountains, /hills. And we go up in the hills, and we get to a point where there is this sign. And it says, road closed ahead. Now, when I see that, me being maybe negative, or I don't know, I say, okay, let's turn around. The road is closed. Where my wife says,
Keep going.
let's keep going. Let's see where the road closes. And here's the lesson. Don't let the roadblocks stop you. Because many a times, the answer is right behind it. You see that curve to the right? Right after you turn that curve, right there, just probably it's 20 feet away from that sign, there was this sign on a tree. That picture is taken now, 14 years. The sign is still there, by the way.
I had better sight then. I wouldn't have seen it now.
It was a small sign about 10 feet in the air on a tree that said land for sale. And I take the phone number, and we had to drive 2 miles back to get signal. And I call, and a gentleman answers, and I said, I see you have a land for sale, and I have a question for you. The first question that I asked him, what do you think I asked him? No, I asked him, are you willing to own or finance? Because remember, banks wouldn't give loans at that time. And his answer was, yes.
Well, he forgot to mention that we started on this process with no money.
I was going to go there, but yes, we had no money. Because going to the country is not about us. If it is his calling, he will take care of everything. But we have to step out. So that was the first question. The second question, I asked him how much he wants an acre. He told me. I was like, okay. And I said, how big is it? And he said, 23 acres. I said, no, it's too big. I was looking somewhere around 10 acres. He said, why don't you look, that sign is on the right side, why don't you look on the left side? I told him, I want about 10 acres. I want somewhere where to put a garden, to have water. He said, why don't you look on the left side? That has a creek, is about 11 acres, and it has a flat spot where you can put a garden. And I said, okay, let me go and look, and I'll call you back. So we go back, and we start walking through those woods. It was all forest. And we walk through those woods. We get to the creek. Good thing it was winter, because that creek is a seasonal creek. In the summer, it goes south, I guess. I don't know. There is no water, hardly. But it was winter, so there was water. But interestingly, we stopped. There was a tree that was coming out of the ground, and it was making a 90 degrees and then going 90 degrees again up. It was like a bench. And we stopped next to that tree, and we prayed. And we thanked God for giving us that property. Now, remember, we were just looking at the property. And we prayed and we thanked God, and we went back, and we called the guy again. And this was on Sunday, right? And I asked him, I said, do you have a plot so I can see how the land is? I mean, you walk through the woods. You don't know exactly how the woods go, right? He said, I have a plot, but it's too big. I cannot fax it to you. I said, can we meet? And he tried to convince us to go to a Starbucks. I mean, mind you, we don't know where Starbucks is. We don't drink coffee. So we told him to come to our office. He came to our office Monday at lunch, less than 24 hours later. He comes to our office. We look on the plan, and I say, we worked in a construction company, both of us for the same company. And we had a big plotter, one of those Xerox machines that you could copy huge plans. And I said, can I make a copy of it? He said, sure. So I go down to the first floor where the plotter was, and my wife started to negotiate. Now, she kind of lowballed him and said, why can't we make this number a round number, Do you accept this price? And he was like, he started to calculate and said, no, but look, I'll give you this option, another round number, if you don't negotiate anymore. I wasn't there, so.
My mom's a realtor. I learned something from her.
So she calls me. I was on the first floor there, and she said, hey, he said this much money. Do you know what I told her? How many of you have heard of David Gates? David Gates. David Gates, the story when he wanted to buy a television for the Lord, and he was sure that it's going to be $1.5 million. And when he goes to make the deal, the guy says $3 million, and he's so upset. And he goes to the bathroom, and he's so upset, and God slaps him and says, do you have $1.5 million? No. So then what's $3 million for you if you don't have $1.5 million? And he buys the television later, and an Adventist television in Latin America. It's a very interesting story. We were listening to that, so I tell her, do we have the other money? No. So might as well answer, say yes. So I come back, and here's the interesting story. And I tell him, hey, we're interested to buying the land. He opens his case, and he takes out the contract. Less than 24 hours later, he brings the contract, puts it up there, and he says, I want 10% down. I said, listen, we are very interested to buy this land, but we don't have the 10% down. Can you wait for us? Sure. How long do you need? I said, well, for about 3 months. No problem. So he writes on the contract, 3 months. Now, my wife is asking him, but what if the land is not 11 acres? What if it's more or less? And he writes on the contract for the plot, not per acre. For the entire property that was there. He had property on the right and on the left, but the property on the left. So here we are less than 24 hours later. We have a contract on a land we've never seen before. Mind you, my mother-in-law is a realtor, and we didn't use her.
She was not happy.
She was not happy. We went, we let God lead us. And then we do the survey to find out how, where the property is and lines are, and we had to, in order to do a deed. And the answer comes back, and to see how God works. And, I called the surveyor and asked him, I see that you've done the survey. He said, yeah, I shouldn't have agreed to the price because it's not 11 acres. I said, why? What do you mean? It's like, it's 15 acres. So I called the seller, and he said, the survey is done. And how big is it? I said, 15 acres. He exploded. And you have to understand why, because he was so sure it was 11 acres. And then we weren't 10, we didn't want more than 10. But he had nothing, he couldn't do anything else because he already put it on the contract. So that was it. In 2009, we got ourselves into a property. But then, you know how time passes, you want to build a house. We didn't know for sure. We went to the bank twice to get a loan. And we got approved, believe it or not, twice to build. And twice we walked out of the vice president's office because we felt it wasn't right. because we had to put the land as a collateral, and we always grew with the idea that even if we have nothing else but the land, we don't want to lose the land. There's a verse that says, "And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee, and to prove thee to know what was in thine heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandments or not." You see, we wanted to move there right away. We started with faith. We planted 27 trees. We cut 250 trees in order to plant 27 trees. It was all forest. We cut another lot right next to the creek. We put a garden. We had the nicest garden that first year. Picket fence, nice garden. Then a year later, a tornado comes and levels the entire area. All the trees that were next to the creek, they went down on that picket fence. And we, when things happen, you are so sure you are on the right way, on the right path. And then something happens, and you start to question yourself. Are we really on the right path? And then we, to make it short, we ended up buying another house. So we kind of abandoned the land, for a while. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't think we need that land. So I tried to sell it. Somebody came, and I went and I gave him a tour of the land, and I told him why I wanted the land, and he was listening. "Man, this is exactly what I want." I told him the price. "Sure, no problem. Let me talk to my wife, and I'll get back with you next week." It's probably 10 years. I never heard back from him. But it goes to see how we forget how God led us in the past. To know that we are not there because something that we have done, but because of something that He has done. So in 2020, here is another thing. The COVID comes. The situation is the way it is. You remember, it's not too long ago. But then somebody came to the Romanian church from Southern Adventist University. And he was preaching there. We were at the Romanian church, and I know I was listening, but I wasn't hearing the same things. My wife was listening there, and all of a sudden the pastor says, "Move, move, move." He was saying, when God is calling, you move. But she only heard, "Move."
I was
3 times.
I was daydreaming, I confess.
So after the sermon, she says, "God told me we have to move."
That's all I got from the sermon.
Guess what my answer was? Well, he has to tell me too, because I didn't hear that. It was 2020. I already made up my mind that I'm too old to move. So at the house where we were, we tried to make it that country. You know how Lot said when he was kicked out of Sodom and Gomorrah? "Can I go to Zoar?" It's a small town. It's not big, right? We were in Jasper. We were in a subdivision. We planted 60 fruit trees. We had 2 gardens, chickens. We were in a subdivision, but in the country, right? And then I realized, hold on. If God told her that we have to move, we have to move. So then in 2020, we started clearing, cutting some trees. And it's not easy. It's a lot of work. It was November of 2020. Those were the first days of work until God was good enough. That's how it looks this week. God is good. After 2.5 years of work, Jason said it's not important to be off-grid. For us, it was. And I'll tell you why. For us, it was important to be off-grid because when I called the power company to bring power there, I think God allowed me to talk to a very arrogant people, and I don't like arrogant people. And he was like, "Well, you have to give us an easement, 16 feet on each side of the power poles. So 32 feet, you cannot put a fence. We can come in whenever we want. It's our place." And I said, "Thank you. You just made it so easy for me. Now I know I don't want to go with the power company." So we decided to go with solar. Now for us, it would have cost exactly the same amount of money to go solar or to put power, to bring power all the way where we are. So we went solar. So If any of you has questions how you can be totally off-grid, ask us. It's not easy, but it's doable. We sold the house in October of 2021, and then moved in a small motorhome somewhere, you cannot see it, but we lived in that motorhome for 15 months while we decided a small house. Money we had, we didn't want to build anymore. We bought a manufactured house, put it up, and finally this week, as some of you have heard, we moved in after 15 months. It's been an amazing experience, hard work. But let me tell you, when God calls you to move, you are not going to see this from the beginning. You are going to see the woods. Don't get discouraged. He can see it. When you see roadblocks, road closed ahead, keep going, because the answer lies right behind it.
Well, for the sake of our other speakers, I did want to ask if you had any cool gardening story, but maybe we may have to save that for a future time, if that's okay. Is there one final takeaway that you would like the audience to remember from your story?
Don't give up, even if it's hard work, even if it's, a lot of people think it's easier for the man, but women can work hard too.
Amen.
So for ladies, don't be scared to get dirty, don't be scared to ruin your nails, don't be scared to sweat. God has many blessings for you, for your children, and it's not just for you, it's for all those that you know, and for the times when they're going to have a need to come somewhere. We shouldn't be selfish. We should be just doing this altruistically, not just for ourselves. And
Amen.
when you have that attitude, God blesses.
Thank you. Amen. Beautiful, beautiful story. So this, you said 15 years? About 15 years, okay. All right, well, I would like to invite our next group up to share their story. And before they do that, I would like them to introduce themselves to all of you, their relationship to one another, and how they've come to the fellowship of our church.
Hello, happy Sabbath. I'm Edward. This is my wife, Natalie. We've been together going on 3 years now? I don't think so. There you go.
Yeah.
Push the other way.
There we go. Am I on?
Yeah.
There we go.
All
Yes,
right.
almost in actually 2 weeks. We met 3 years ago.
Yes.
So, yes. Yeah.
So our country living experience is mixed at best.
Yeah.
All right.
It is.
So, question was?
Okay.
That should be easy to do. We lived it, right? Well, you think it would be easy, but you never know where to start. And, you always want to end in the right place. So, when Natalie and I met, I was a single father of Ace. Many of you probably know Ace. And we were going through some issues with my previous relationship, and we ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in Pooler, Georgia. And I was building a gas station there, like a big truck stop. And we had stayed there for about 8 months together. And while we were there together, we didn't really have the relationship that we have now with God. But it was during that time that we were there that we discovered God together through some really unique experiences. And then we also discovered the Sabbath, and then we started recognizing and holding the Sabbath together independently from the rest of our community. And then we found a Seventh-day Adventist church in Pooler, Georgia, and we started attending Seventh-day Adventist church. And we're like, these people don't serve meat at their potlucks, and I can't figure that out. So we stuck around and we learned a little bit more about what Seventh-day Adventists do, and what their beliefs were and the things they held. So in that tornado of faith, Ace and I carried with us, and it's been just. I can't say it any better than Roberto does. It was a miracle. Miracles, just miracle after miracle. And during the custody battle, Ace was with me, and I was on my site, and it was nothing but mud. It had rained for like a week straight, and we're down in South Georgia. And my lawyer called me, and he said, Edward, you did not tell me that you were taking methamphetamines, because your drug test came back positive for methamphetamines. And I said, you know what, I have not been taking methamphetamines, and if I had, I probably would have told you, and I would not have voluntarily agreed to take drug tests as a condition of my custody. So when we got off the phone, my knees hit the ground so hard, and I wept, and I prayed, and I wept, and I said, God, I don't know what you have for me, but whatever it is, I hope I'm strong enough to see it through. It was and from that point on, I told myself I wasn't going to cry. I almost didn't talk about it, but
You won't get that promise from me.
so when that storm ended, or was coming to a closing, I met Natalie. You talk about blessings. You talk about blessings.
So we met in 2020, and for some people, I know 2020 was the year that it's like, oh, everything was shut down, life was horrible, everybody was isolated. For us, it was in February of 2020, and it was just absolute blessing because life slowed down. Everything that was hectic about both of our lives stopped, and we got to totally focus on getting to know each other and bringing our kids together. And we realized very quickly that all those prayers for God to bless us, with the person that could help us live this life that He has for us. He brought us together. You guys know my daughter Lexi. We have somewhat of a similar experience, and it was Lexi and I pretty much most of her life. And we came together, and very quickly, we knew that one of the first things he asked me is he said, can you make me a promise? And this was one of our phone conversations till like 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Those things you do when you're first dating. And then you realize how important sleep is after weeks of that. And he said, can you make me a promise? And I said, absolutely. And he said, can you promise that you will always put God first in our marriage and our family? And I was like, absolutely. And from there, all of our conversations, we knew that we had so much in common as far as what we wanted to do here in this world, in this life, and just for what God was putting on our heart. We're fairly new to the church. Edward introduced me. He started talking to me. He started introducing me to Walter Weiss and different things like that. And I started learning. And the more I learned, the more that it all made sense to me. And I remember that I have this dear friend, Sharon Hickman, the Hickmans from CFAF, and I text her and I said, do I remember that correctly that you guys go to a Seventh-day Adventist church? And she said, yes. We're out of town for the next, at that point I think you guys weren't even having service. But she said, we should be having service again soon. I'll let you know when that happens. And she let me know, but she's like, unfortunately, we're going to be out of town, but if you want to come, come. And so we all came, and the Vates, Johnny met us at the door. We knew them from CFAF. Didn't even know they were here. And you guys know
Yeah.
Johnny.
Yeah.
Johnny's like, with doors wide open, welcome, come on in. It was amazing. And then we saw Paco and Irma and their family. We knew them from CFAF, and it was just, the thing that was said this morning, immediately it felt like home. Immediately it felt like home. So we're, fairly new here. It's been, what, a year and a half? I think roughly a year and a half, I guess we've been, maybe like,
Pushing 2.
no, maybe 2 years, yeah. Yeah, we came like maybe it's been like close to 2.5, because it was right when you guys resumed in 2020 services, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So here we are.
Yeah.
And as far as the idea of getting to the country, we both, my background is as a health medical psychologist, so I have worked for over 20 years helping people change behaviors, not just for mental health, but for their physical health, helping them, learn how to eat better, how to sleep better, how to change all the aspects of their life to reverse whatever may be ailing them, or prevent it, preferably prevent it to start with, right? And I knew that I always wanted to have a facility where someone could come, whether they could afford to or not, a facility where they could come and learn. And I love the outdoors. I love gardening. I always felt like, being the self-sustaining life was important. And Edward brought the other side to it. He brought the how to do all of that. Us women are strong, but there's a lot of things I can't do that he can do.
Yeah, she's very strong.
So we were...
I was like, it's a blessing that she has to use a cane to get around, because I would not be able to keep up with her, quite
I don't know
honestly.
about that.
And so I think that was one of our biggest things when we decided to buy the property. We initially started with 3 acres, and on faith, I went ahead and, when we decided to clear, I went ahead and cleared 2 acres of the neighbor's property as well.
Accidentally. It was an
Knowing that he
accident.
was going to sell it to us in the
It
future.
was an accident.
No, but actually he did come to us and say, hey, I have some acreage. You guys said you might want it, and
Two we
it's for
cleared
sale.
accidentally.
The 2 we cleared accidentally, yeah.
It has a spring head on it, and we
Yes.
were like, oh, this is perfect.
Yes.
So it's active, ready to go.
It is.
Yeah.
So we have a well. So one of the criteria, I guess, was another question, right? So we wanted a home that had a good south-facing exposure as far as a rooftop, because we plan on going solar as well. And so we're not totally off the grid. There's certain laws and regulations within Georgia that can limit how much you can go off grid if you're already attached to utilities. Solar companies don't tell you that, but it's true. So your options to go totally off grid, if you already have a utility contract with Georgia Power or whoever, you can not do legally. So we discovered that after investing a substantial amount of money and going off grid. But we do have now a really good backup for our well pump. So we do that. That's on there, and a few other life support systems. So we got all that stuff in place. And then, so developing the property has been an ongoing process for the last couple of years now. And that has been, the challenge with that has been, one of my challenges, not hers, was to always make sure that she was as independent from me as possible. So facilitating her any way necessary to ensure that she can actually do what she was called to do and what she wanted to do on the property. So one of our first investments was a little Kubota tractor. Yeah, that made it impossible to catch her.
It's a lot of fun.
That made it impossible. So now she's like a workhorse out there. She's like running around. She's using the bucket. She's lifting. She's digging holes. She's transporting stuff from one place to another. She has Ace load the bucket for her, and then she travels from one place to another, and Ace is unloading the bucket, and I'm working, and we're planning, and she'll come up with surprises. And, hey, we got 26 trees coming next week, so let's get ready for that.
On Valentine's Day. Yay.
Yeah, so...
Fruit love in the air.
That's right. So it's but the one thing that I found, is that we complement each other. And I think one of the reasons why my past relationships had failed is because I always thought everything was supposed to be 50-50. And then when I came to the conclusion, or came to the realization, that it's not, it's 100-100. It's 100 to 100. And when you commit to serving a person 100%, that changes the whole dynamics of your whole relationship. Everything about you changes. And that's what Christ did for us. Did he not? So, well, our property is a 3-acre lot. Well, the initial 3 acres, now we have 5, well, 5.5 now. Yeah. But the initial 3 acres is granite and clay. So, so when we founded it, we decided to call it Fields of Faith Farm.
Oh, sorry, you have to back up.
Did I? Okay, I have to back up.
The way that we came up with Fields of Faith Farm, let me go back to that one.
Yeah.
The way that we came up with Fields of Faith Farm is, and talk about those moments when you have discouragement, and when you're like, okay, well, were we really supposed to do this? Because we have to back up. You guys all know Vio. Vio was our realtor. He helped us find this property, and we looked at tons and tons and tons and tons of property. And it was 2020 when properties were going like that, and for way more money than they were going for the year before. And like, especially anything with land, because we're still in Cumming, we're almost Dawsonville. If you go farther out, it was cheaper, but we needed to stay fairly close so that he didn't have longer than an hour and a half any direction to go to a job site. So we were trying to stay near, and we found this property, and for us, we left a debt-free life, a home paid for, everything was paid for, and we actually incurred debt to buy this property because of the timing that it was and everything. Interest rates were great, and that was all good, but we were feeling so led to do this that we incurred debt to do it. And we got there, it was April when it was closing, it was April 2021, and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm behind the 8 ball now, I gotta hurry up and plant things, it's a little late. So we were just quickly just doing whatever we could, and it all failed, every bit of it. It's like you couldn't dig down farther than this, hard as a rock, well, it was rock and granite. And it's just, and then you wouldn't get any rain, and we had things cleared like right away. He's got some great buddies that accidentally cleared the 2 additional acres, and and so I was looking out. We got this deck, and I was looking out through there, and it was the middle of summer. We'd planted this. We were just trying to plant like red clover and things to like really try to break up that soil, feed the soil. It hadn't rained. It was just hard as a rock looking out through there. And we were supposed to have rain, and this rain literally lasted for about 5 minutes. And I was just like sitting out there just like, oh yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it stopped. And I remember feeling so discouraged because I'm just looking at, to me, fields of mud and fields of clay, and just feeling like, are we really supposed to be doing this? Because here we are, middle of summer, nothing's growing, nothing's happening. And that was when we just started, things started just popping up. Again, like you have the same message over and over, and it was all about permaculture and building up and not going down, and, like diverting the water and all these types of things. And that's where we came up with the Fields of Faith. It went from Fields of Mud to Fields of Faith. It was like we were drawn here, and there's no doubt about it that we're supposed to be here, and here we are.
That's right.
So, and this man right here, he took on the idea of permaculture and he ran with it. He just started putting everything into place.
Well, while she was planning on fulfilling her vision of the property, I was actually out looking at the property. I was watching where the water where it flowed every time it rained, where it accumulated, all those different things. And so, when I did clear the property, I cleared it in a way that it was going to open those pathways to us and be able to preserve as much water on the site as possible. Because we're sitting on clay, that water just hits the clay and runs. So you got to find a way to trap it eventually if you want to use it for agriculture. So in doing that, I think it was one morning I was on my way to work, and she, bless her heart, every morning I get a smoothie and a kiss goodbye. And I'm like heading out the door like 5:45, 6 o'clock, and I get a smoothie and a kiss goodbye. And we were in the garage, and I could tell something was really bothering her. And I was like, "You okay?" She's like, "Are you sure we're supposed to be here? Are you sure we're supposed to be doing this?" I said, "Look at all the walls God knocked down in front of us to put us right here in this spot right now. And look how much we've learned from all the things that we failed at doing properly. And look at all the many successes we're going to have in the near future with everything that we've learned. And then we'll celebrate those. And maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk about it someday." But here we are, talking about it.
Yeah.
And we gave each other a big hug, and we prayed, and I got in my truck, and we left. And I checked on her a few times throughout the day, and she was feeling much better. She was back at it.
We're such a compliment to each other. If I have doubts, he's my rock, and he's like, everything's good.
I think it was my second text that day. She took a picture of her throwing seed down, so I was like, "Yeah, we're back at it.
I was
We're
back
at
on
it.
track.
We're going."
Me and the
Here we go.
Kubota, we were back on track. Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Okay. Does that wrap up question number 1?
I think we probably have gone into question number 2,
think
but
we
ours
probably
kind of
have.
just blended.
Yeah.
Just blend? Okay. I do want to back up to one thing, because this is going to be something that I'm going to point out later. And Kayleen was talking about we're going to hopefully have an opportunity to present more later on specific topics. And one of my passions is medicinal herbs and also foraging, getting your food and your medicine from your backyard. And even if you don't have 3 acres, 5 acres, 15 acres, a quarter of an acre, there's so much food in your backyard. Look at this picture that we have right here. Every one of these plants was already there. It wasn't something that we had to go in and say, okay, here, I'm going to plow up and dig down and plant this and have it grow. There is so much food and medicine in that picture that was already there, that was native, that thrived. And we went in and graded and cut down, accidentally, 5 acres worth of vegetation in that first year because we were in such a hurry to plant. We were in such a hurry to get going because it was April and it was like we were behind the 8 ball that we missed a huge opportunity. Last year, 2022, we let it
back.
Yeah, we looked back. We had learned so much from permaculture, from having a food forest, looking at what's already there, looking at what's native to your property, that we just let everything go. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard the term no mow May. Well, no mow May is no matter what your yard is, don't mow, don't weed, don't do anything. Just if you're not spraying chemicals on your property, just let it go and see what you've got. And that's what we had when we let it go the next year. You can see, for some of you that know medicine, we've got chickweed up there that can be a replacement for spinach and basil and those types of things. We've got turkey tail mushrooms. We've got elderberry. People pay a fortune for bags of European elderberry when the American elderberry is better for you. We have tons of it. There were blackberries, like the entire perimeter of the property. We were 6 feet deep in wild blackberries, muscadines, you name it. And I mean, dandelion, plantain, the things that people kill on their lawns, their medicine and their food. So, this is something I'll focus on more later, but my biggest piece of advice is no matter where you live, no matter how big or small it is, watch it for a season before you disturb it and look and see what's already there. And believe it or not, even after all the damage that we came in and did, we located, just last spring, we located 39 different plants that were either food or medicine that are there native, that you can't kill if you tried to, because that's where they're supposed to grow and they're hardy. So think about that as far as survival.
And keep in mind, 5 acres wasn't cleared overnight.
No.
And developed overnight, and we're still developing, but I think Roberto can agree with me. It's a 1/10 of an acre or 1/4 of an acre at a time. It's a ongoing process. And, you know, as long as you're planning correctly and you're understanding what's going on your property, if you understand where your water's flowing, which is the biggest thing, if you understand your water flow, you can actually manipulate your water flow to be most productive for you and what you want to do, then you can accomplish a lot. You don't want to wrestle with water. You never want to wrestle with water because water wins every time. So it's going to go where it's going to go.
It's going to wash a lot of red clover seeds away.
Yes, it is.
A lot, and then you'll find you have a big bunch of them right down at the bank at the bottom of the hill, not where you wanted it.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
So, if you'll see in this picture right here, again, this is just some pictures from No Mow May. The idea of it anyway. Do you guys see the picture that's got dandelion in it, the yellow plant? Right next to that's plantain. And what you'll find is that all of these plants, they live together. You know, you'll have poison ivy and jewelweed right next to it, the antidote for poison ivy. So if you just let things go, let them grow naturally for a little bit, if you can stand it, and, you know, just live with it for a little bit, you'll be amazed at what's there. We've got so much passion fruit and muscadine and just things that are so delicious and beneficial for us, but you can also build your home apothecary out of your backyard.
True. True.
And here's some of
All right.
Edward's parts. Here's the ladies. These are the ladies.
That's right.
They are, we call it the big rooster there. His name is Poppycock, and these are his gypsy chicks.
That's
because that tractor right there, that chicken tractor right there, moves around the yard, so they're like a bunch of gypsies.
Right. So the contraption you see there is called a chicken tractor. And what we do with that is we create compost. So when we realized that everything that we were trying to plant and grow was trying to grow out of something dead, then we realized that we had to make our soil living again. So we had to start developing methods and ways to make the soil living. One of the best ways to do that is to incorporate carbon and nitrogen that's gathered in a local source. So everything in your yard. So carbon, a good source of carbon would be like your dry leaves. All right, so your dry leaves or wood chip. That's a good source of carbon. Nitrogen could be table scraps. It could be anything basically wet. Chicken manure is nitrogen. So there's a lot of examples of carbon and nitrogen in which when you bring them together and you have a good airflow, you can create your own soil. Okay, this is called compost. So there's different methods of growing compost, and I think in future lectures we'll get more into that and how we actually do that. But if you want to create a living soil, something that plants nourish and can grow in, and you can see some of those piles in the back. You see our two dogs there. Those are some of our permaculture mounds there. That is a composition of soil, living soil, and wood chip. So, and then you'll see that we started growing wheatgrass in there. So wheatgrass is a really good commodity. In this case, we're just using it as a nitrogen fixer. So a nitrogen fixer is a plant that gathers nitrogen from the air and it puts it down into the ground. And then by putting the nitrogen into the ground, you're also bioaccumulating a lot of the bacteria and algae and funguses that help develop your soil, right? So you want those three elements in your soil. Fungus is developed because we have wood chip in there. So the fungus is attracted to the wood chip and it starts breaking down wood. That's what fungus is for. It breaks down wood. And by doing that, you're creating a symbiotic circle of life in your soil. A symbiotic. What does symbiotic mean? Did I just make that up?
I don't know.
I think I just made that up.
Sound like amphibious or something. Maybe you're going over to the aqua.
Yeah, it's my marine background. I'm amphibious. So that's what we're doing there, and it's really working out really good. We had 2 failed gardens last season, and we tried different methods. All of them were going down. And August of last year, when we realized that the last garden we put in was going to die, we started with this system. And we imported some of the items. Our neighbor, actually, we were praying about it. Our neighbor says, hey, man, I have all this compost. Or not compost, but wood chip that has been sitting here for 2 years. And it's like, you interested in that? I was like, yeah, I think I am. So I got hooked onto my trailer and just drove next door. He loaded up with his skid steer, and we took a bunch over, and then we just started laying it out in a pattern to start trapping water on our property. And so we kind of had that laid out. I had the property graded at about a 3 to 4% grade from the front porch down so that we could incrementally trap on the way up back to the porch. And so in permaculture, you have different zones. You have zone 0, which is like your porch, and you have zone 1, which is something that you would use for like an herb garden for cooking and things like that. You can have readily access to it. So you can just go out there and pick for cooking. And then you have zone 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. But and our chickens always stay in zone 1 or 2, just because of predators and because we're always
Easy to
growing
get all the
something new.
scraps out there too.
Yeah, and get
Yeah.
the scraps out there to them and feed them. So, we can talk more about that at another date as
Yes.
far as the details of composting.
See in the center picture at the top, you see that black bucket? That is an in situ worm compost bucket. And so if you don't have a chicken tractor, one thing you can do, even if you have a raised garden bed, just one, you can get a black bucket, drill holes all the way around the side and all in the bottom, fill it full of, again, food scraps and brown leaves, food scraps, brown leaves, order or get some from your neighbor, a whole bunch of worms, toss them in there, put that lid on the top with a rock on top so that your raccoons don't come and get it. And guess what? You've got worms going in and out of your garden bed, but they're going in there to get their goodies. So like you basically have just a built-in worm farm right in the middle of your garden bed.
Worms do not have teeth.
No, they sense everything with their entire body.
That's right.
Chew up your big one.
No,
That's
no,
right. That's right.
no. So, and we generally don't put citrus in ours or onion, garlic, that type of thing. That stuff usually, well, the citrus, we do all kind of other stuff with that. But like for our
compost that
chickens
stuff.
and the worms, we usually don't give them that.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful place just to get started. So just with a simple black bucket, even if you're starting very small.
Yeah. And I would recommend starting very small, especially if you're not experienced. And I think the biggest thing we could probably say is do something.
Yes.
Do something and fail. And then do something and fail. And do something. And don't be afraid to just do something. Because if you haven't done it before, if you think that you're just going to get up one day and be an expert at it, you got a lot to learn. You need to be humbled a little bit like we were. Because, yeah, we did a lot thinking we were just going to jump right into it, and we were humbled. So you have to do something.
Yeah, I agree with that because we jumped in with the mindset of I've had gardens before and they were very successful. This property, the same thing didn't apply because the dirt, it was just dead soil. And we even had an experience of shipping in some organic garden soil from a very local place around the corner from us that was, we filled a raised garden bed with it and it was dead soil. The little seedlings popped up, we were cheering, they were this tall, and 9 weeks later they were still this tall.
Yeah.
And then he added some of his compost from the ladies, from the chicken tractor, and everything sprung up, and it was exciting. And we were so excited, and then we did not think that we needed to cover them for that really horrendous cold snap that we had. We thought we'd be okay. We thought they were big enough, and they were not.
No, they were not.
How do you know before you would buy that soil if it was living soil in your hand? Or do you?
It was beautiful. You would have thought it was perfect. It was beautiful, rich, black soil, and we had 2 huge truckfuls delivered in, this big mound, and the only thing that ever grew out of it was this weird-looking fern plant that comes from South Florida that will take over your yard. So everyone that I would see, I'd be like, Ace, grab it. And I don't throw it in the compost either because then it's going to take over everything. I was like, throw it in the fire. That was the only thing that ever grew in it. You'd see this big hill and it was covered with this weird looking South Florida native plant. So where they got this soil, I don't know, but we learned our lesson about shipping things in from outside. And what Edward was saying, your garden's going to do better if you can try to create soil from what's on your property anyway.
Yeah.
It-
Your soil is more adapted to your environment. It's almost like a community. So if you're bringing organisms in from other communities, it's going to take they're not really adaptogenic. They're not really quickly coming in and doing exactly what they need to do. Yeah, so it really is smart if you have the assets to keep things as local as possible, or if you have somebody providing something for you, try to stay with that source, because that source already has, you already have a combination of that source on your property. So if you're going to import, if you have no other choice but to import, then you want to import and stay consistent with your source.
Stay with your proven source.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can think of it, it's almost similar to if you have some, if you ferment things. Anybody in here make kefir and things like that? Kefir or sourdough or whatever. I could give you a starter. You could take that sourdough starter to your house, and your sourdough starter will then take on your environment and be different than mine. So it's very similar with the soil. It's,
Correct,
you know,
yeah.
it's a living thing. Right. Well, now his
yeah.
stuff was great. His
Yeah.
stuff was good. It really was. This was something that he'd shipped from, obviously, South Florida, even though they were selling it around the corner. Right. So yeah.
No,
Well,
it's
he's
great,
right across
yeah.
the fence, so I think that
Yeah.
might be close enough.
Yeah, with same trees. We have same
Yeah.
trees bordering our property. So
Yeah, we hope so.
same roots,
So
same trees, same leaves.
yeah. You want us to wrap up with some like important points? Yeah, let's hear it. Okay.
Okay.
I have a few things up here. I'll go through this, and then you can tie us up if you'd like. Does that sound good?
That sounds reasonable.
You can see some of the things up here. We did break down and buy a greenhouse. My sweetheart here has all this glass that he's going to build my dream house, greenhouse at someday. But, you know, all of us, we don't have much time. We generally have Sundays to work, and that's it on the property. So we did break down and bought a little greenhouse. But if you can't do that, I'm not sure if you can see very well, there's some bins in there, and that's called winter sowing. And it's still not too late to do that if you'd like to. Winter sowing, you can put any seed that needs to be overwintered, and you can even put tomatoes, peppers, those types of things in there. You put 6 inches of really good, get some really good organic potting soil. Seed starting is okay, but it's better for potting soil, so it'll have more nutrients in it. Put a good 6 to 8 inches in there, and you sow your seeds, mark it. Ace is a sweetheart. He drilled 744 holes for those 4 bins for me, because the bottom is like it's like a colander. It's holes, and then the lid is holes. You seal it up, you wet it really good, you seal it up, you don't touch it again. So when we get the rain will seep into those holes, and it will drain out. And that is a very effective method of starting your seeds. We could have started these back in December and just let them go. And you'll get a huge jump start. The bins aren't that expensive. I didn't pay too much for these, but I am seeing online people are picking them up at the dollar store even. And a lot of people do them in gallon milk jugs and stuff like that, but we don't drink milk, so I didn't want to have to go around begging to my neighbors for milk jugs, so I just did the bin method.
Yeah.
Another thing, if you'll see just to the side of that, the pot that has the little cluster in the center on the bottom, last year we had this abundant amount of tomatoes from our garden. That was one thing that loved our changes. And I just tried this method of slicing the tomatoes, throwing a little soil on top, sticking the pot somewhere, and that's what happened. No tending to it, nothing. And I probably, last weekend, that's after I separated out over 100 seedlings from it, and that's still what's left in it. And if you pull up a little hunk of them, you'll see that slice of tomato will have about 20 little seedlings growing up out of that one little slice of tomato. Super easy. You can do that even if you don't have land. You can do that, stick it outside your house in a little protected spot. You have it, and you can have potted tomato plants outside. And then we have, kind of wrapping the corner there, we have some wheatgrass, some microgreens, those types of things. You can do that. It's a quick way to grow some food even if you have no space at all. And then the fish up there, Edward can talk to you about. That's our fish that have lived now for 3 years and started out in an aquaponic garden that he put in our kitchen in the first house before we moved.
That's right.
These
Yeah.
guys
Do you remember that?
These guys
Yeah.
have lived under, last winter we didn't do anything. They were out in the open, and they would have an inch of ice on the top, and they lived through it perfectly fine. So those are goldfish, and they are getting huge. They're getting huge. This time we decided to put them in the greenhouse because having them in the greenhouse, that body of water, will actually keep the greenhouse warmer. It's just a passive way of keeping. No. Oh, in the greenhouse we do now. No. No. We just recently even put anything to give them, for the bubbles, pump, whatever you want to call it. We just recently did that.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. They finally earned it. They lived 3 years. They finally got some oxygen. So.
And we would have more than that, except for one day we were refilling it and it overflowed and it was like a waterfall, and 3 of them went over the waterfall to their demise and we didn't realize it. So we would have more, but these guys are hardy. And as far as an aquaponics system, we've had some failures, we're learning.
Yeah.
But as far as an aquaponics system, you can't beat goldfish. They're so hardy, and that water, when he changes the water out, he puts it on everything, and you just see, we had some goji berries that were looking pretty pitiful, and he just took and sunk the base of the pots that they were in, and the next day, they just came to life. So these are some small things that you can do no matter how much space you have. And
Yep.
Go ahead.
Oh, just a quick point on the aquaponics thing. I'll probably put together a little center on the property just for display. But if aquaponics is really ideal for people that have limited space. So just like she said, I assembled one in the kitchen at our old house because she wanted an herb garden that she can get to and cook with. So I put one in front of the window, and I had these fish going in a little 10-gallon tank, running PVC pipes simply, and just the process is just creating an ecosystem. You just pump the water into the pots, the plants consume what the fish waste, and clean the water, and then dumps back into the tank again. And so you have clean water that's gone through the root system of the plants, and all the nitrogen and other items are taken out through the root systems, and mostly the ammonium, which is your fertilizer. So your fertilizer is mostly ammonium based. So that's what we did. Yes, and we have.
You don't know what's being fed to those fish.
So we use 1,000 gallons a week. So that's 1,000 gallons there, that tank, and so I can distribute that all through the garden throughout the week. Just simply putting a pump in it, and so I can irrigate our new fresh beds just before we plant with fish, and it can be implemented just about anywhere. I can put that pond anywhere on the property during the summer with my little generator and just pump water wherever I need it. Fresh fertilizer, made right there. Yeah.
Just a couple other things that I want to encourage people. If you're already gardening or you're thinking about it, look at what you consume regularly and try to figure out a way to grow that, because then you're not dependent on some outside source. How many people in here use tomato sauce or tomato paste or fire roasted tomatoes or enchilada sauce or all those things? So look at something like that and grow a huge variety of tomatoes. And if you don't know how to can, get with somebody who does know how to can, or make it a party. That's what one of my best friends and I were planning on doing, is every Thursday we're going to preserve something. We're going to get together and anybody's welcome to come to our teaching kitchen. That's what we just finished. We did finish that out. So you're welcome to come and to learn, but bring your stuff and can, dehydrate. Some people want to freeze dry. Do whatever you can to try to replace something you consume regularly from your land. And tomatoes are super easy. Tomatoes are like one of those crops that we can all grow, and you have a ton. So if anybody wants any tomato seedlings, I will have them for you.
Just
share with
this.
everybody. Swap plants, swap seedlings, because sometimes you'll have a huge amount of one thing, and you only get 2 of the other, and share and swap around, and save your seeds. Always mark part of your garden for seed saving. Let some of that kale go to flower. Let some of those tomatoes, make sure you keep them, maybe the ones that got too ripe and you didn't get to, slice them up. Dehydrate if you need to for food, or pop them in the refrigerator. I store all my seeds in the refrigerator, and some of you that know me from Facebook or whatever, I did a little experiment of some mixed salad greens that I mistakenly had not planted, and the seeds were dated 2015, and every one of them came up. But it was because most likely because they were good seeds to start with, very viable seeds, and then I had stored them in the refrigerator.
And compost.
And compost, yes. And find perennial versions of things you eat a lot of. There are perennial versions of spinach or similar to spinach.
Yeah.
There's wild lettuce. There's all sorts of things like that. Find as many things that you can that are perennial so that you're not dependent on getting seeds, because seeds are significantly more expensive this year than they were last year. And they've gone up each year since 2020.
I think everything is.
Everything's gone up, yeah.
Yeah.
So find a way that you're not dependent upon getting those seeds and seed swap. We can have a seed swap here at the church.
Oh, absolutely. Be awesome.
Because everybody's going to have an abundance of one thing that somebody else might like to have some.
I think we just bypassed the elders on that, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, seed swap. Let's get that on
Sorry.
the agenda, folks.
Okay, you can slap me on, you can hit me on the knuckles. There, yeah,
There you go.
there you go.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of
Perfect.
corn. All right. Okay. Yes, a couple.
I'll let you wrap us up.
You will?
Yeah,
Wow.
please.
You're so much better at this than I
I
am. It's
know,
like-
no.
Okay, so things to take away. Things are not getting less expensive. Things are not easier to find. If you do not become proactive and productive in your own life, you will become dependent. Eventually, you will become dependent. Are we all dependent? Yes, we are dependent on God's grace. Can we all depend on each other? Yes, we are a Christian family that love and embrace each other, right? I've been inspired by each of you in many different ways. And when we decided to take on the debt to do this, we did it for the community that we don't even know yet, and some of you in that community, because we wanted to use our strengths to be strong for you, and God's allowing us to do that, and it's a blessing, and I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm Mr. Wayne. Mr. Wayne inspires me just by getting here, you know? So it's do something. If you have any questions, feel free to call me. I'm always available. If you, we did open our new business, which is Fields of Faith Farm, which we do in the mock kitchen and stuff like that. There's a wealth of information that Natalie has that she shares with me daily. So it's a true blessing to be in her presence and learn from her. She's very graceful with me, which I really appreciate. Because I can be kind of a bull at times, you know? So it's like, make it happen, let's go. But yeah, she's been very, very good for me and with me. I love her.
This is what we felt called to do. We wanted to have a place that no matter who you are, where you come from, there is a place to come and learn on the property, in the kitchen, wherever, to improve your health. So however we can help, that's our goal. And I think hopefully in the future, presentations, we're going to have on-site visits and things like that, possibly like on Sundays or something. Yeah. I'm not good at that type of stuff, so Kayleen is our go-to. Yeah, the social media, YouTube stuff I'm not great at, but I'm willing, and whatever services that we have or our property, however we can bring it together so that everybody can come and learn. And then each of you are going to come and you'll see something we don't see, and you'll bring added value, added information and wisdom, and it's kind of what you were talking about this morning. If we can kind of come together and create that team with everybody's gifts and everybody be very open to receive each other's gifts, we'll be able to have such an impact and help so many people be able to just really take care of themselves. And I truly believe that people that never would have even thought about, like, what is Seventh-day Adventist? What does that even mean? Where are the, there's so many people that need this, that want this, and then they're going to realize what's available to them. What's available to them, and that they can become a part of this family as well. So.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll post this online, and we do look forward to having our speakers back again to share some more of their expertise. Now, our next group is a little unique group. I'd like to invite them up. And there's one thing we have in common with each other.
We love each other.
There's many things we have in common.
We are sisters of Christ.
Maybe
And,
we're three stooges.
yeah. That too. Hi, boy.
I think you're on.
Hello.
All right, you're
I'm
good.
on. I'm on.
Well, we got to hear stories of from beautiful couples. I think our journey started. We started our journeys as couples as well, and something did change in our journey. I'll let you.
I'm Barbara Rattery, and my husband was not an excited person about country living. He lived in the city his whole life and loved the excitement of the city life, I guess. I was a farm girl. I was a pony girl. I always wanted to be back where we had horses again. And so after, I guess, 9 months, my husband left me. He passed away in December. And I went from always knowing, once I started this move, that I was doing this for God's people, for not just for myself, but this property would be a refuge for whoever needed to be escaping the city because they had stayed to continue spreading the gospel. So my goal, even before moving to the property and leaving my home in downtown Roswell, I actually started my purchasing of food and dry canning of food to be able to support and feed multitudes. I knew that that Christ was very direct. I was being very guided and very forced to make these decisions. But then something wonderful happened. Jonathan Euler, my very good friend, Cynthia's son, came home for Christmas, and he kept walking over to the property next door, and Cynthia would say, "Jonathan, that's not ours." And he'd say, "I know, but I'm on my way to Barbie's house. She's cooking dinner." And it was Jonathan's driving wish that his mother and I would be next door to each other because he didn't feel in end times either of us could survive unless we were there to support each other. Mm-hmm. So my very good friend one day is pulling out of her driveway, and there is a man putting a for sale sign up on the property next door to her. Adjacent, we are, I say we have an 11.5 acre mini farm because she has 5 and I have 6 acres. She calls and she goes, they're putting for sale signs up, there's a man here. And I said, "Stop him, tell him that we want to meet." And I drove up, she took all his signs down. I drove up, met with him, put an offer in. The next day the people accepted, but I was convinced the neighbor next door had just come over a little on my land. So I was afraid to close until I knew whether my neighbor had encroached on the land. At this point, supplies are almost impossible to get. COVID is still, people are still COVID paranoid.
What
And
year? What year was that?
that was 2021, April? Yeah. Was it, that's when? Yeah, it was April 21. So anyway, they accepted. I called all these different surveyors. One of them said he was booked for 3 years in advance. Another one, he was so booked, he just didn't think he'd ever get to me. And another one I talked to, he said, oh, I don't have time. I said, Mr. Caudell, you're doing everything wrong. Here I am, a Southern girl coming with guns, and you're doing surveys for the Yankees, and they're coming to take your guns. I was surveyed the next day. Phil will tell you, when I want stuff done, I want it done now. Well, unfortunately, that's the way I moved on to the property. I wanted it done now, everything. And I didn't realize that you have to play political games, and you can't get your electricity until this person is blessed this and that and the other, and it becomes a very drawn-out process. It was going to take me 9 months to get a septic, so I privatized. Well, now I have a very expensive septic system, but I ain't got no water to run into it. And those outhouses are looking better and better every day. And then, just so many different things that I did wrong because I didn't seek counsel. She tried to tell me, you cannot have a garden your first year. But before I ever bought the property, I bought 2 greenhouses. I had my dirt. I had beautiful benches. And she kept saying, you ain't gonna have a garden this year. Well, I didn't even have water to have a garden this year. So I stayed very, very frustrated. And I think the thing I learned through all of it is when you're embarking on something like this, seek counsel. God will really help you tremendously, but talk to people that have been through it, who've stumbled, people that bought the wrong things in the wrong sequence, like my 2 greenhouses. I have 1 million seed starter things, but I have probably $1,000 in seeds. But they're in the freezer because I can't put them out yet. So there's a lot of frustration, but yet there's so much excitement. And then you have the Sabbath. When we bought the property, had no idea that everywhere I go on my land is mountain views. So you sit on the deck and you start in the morning, the rooster crows over here, the other one crows here, then the donkeys start to bray back and forth from different areas, and you're just sitting there and you're just thinking how incredible it is to serve this God that we know as our living God, our Creator. It just pulls you so close to Him. And by the way, I live on Mud Mountain, if anybody's wondering.
Or Mud Hill.
Yeah, or Mud Hill. So and I have a lot of clover seed, but haven't been able to get it in the ground. Every time I think I've got a place I can hoe and dig, I'll be danged if they don't come in with the Kubota and just tear that area up to put some other pipe in that I asked for. So the best thing is know that when you start this, you're not going to have this beautiful garden. I visualized mine as this exquisite Elizabethan garden, and man, boy, was I wrong. I've got all kinds of weeds. There's no telling what I've got on that land that we'll be able to eat and forage without planting.
Exactly.
So we know where we're going. But all in all, what a wonderful trip this has been. I go back to my home in Roswell to get my mail, to see my young couple that purchased the home. His wife is pregnant. And I never lived there. I left, the day I walked out of that house, I think I just walked out of the city forever. It's painful to come back into the city to work, to have a doctor's appointment, to do any of those things. It's as though I've never been there. I didn't belong to begin with, and I found my home, and it's very close to where I think the Lord wanted me to be, and I'm thrilled over it.
Amen.
So that's it for me for the day.
We'll get back to you. Cynthia, your turn.
Okay,
Oh, you have your own.
I do. My name is Cynthia, and I'm a visitor here to the Chestatee Church. I live in Murphy, North Carolina, with Barbara, as you've heard, right next door, my best friend. Barbara and I actually met through my son's nonprofit in the country of Haiti, and she wanted to support the work in Haiti, and we came together over that and have been to Haiti several times together to further that mission work. And so we became fast friends over a period of years. And she was wanting to move to the country, saw that she needed to move to the country, and it was the right time of her life to make that move. So since then, we have been working on our 2 homesteads. To back up just a little bit, I was the city girl in my marriage. My husband was the country boy, raised on 150 acres in Ohio, a very flat ground that they raised everything on, from Clydesdale horses, which won a lot of blue ribbons at the county fairs, and then lots of grain, soybeans, wheat, that type of thing. So he was the experienced farmer. As I said, I was the city girl, and I always wanted to live in the country, but I had never had that opportunity. So as life was moving on, we had been married for almost 41 years, and we were in a situation where we had a beautiful home in Roswell, not that far from Barbara, even though I didn't know her at the time. It was a home that we had built. We had made most of our money through real estate. It became a game in Southern California that you bought a house, and when it had doubled in price, you sold it, and then bought another one, and when that doubled in price, you sold that one. So we actually made more money selling our personal homes than we did in our careers. And by the time we moved to Georgia, we had a nice nest egg, and we built a large home in Roswell, primarily for investment purposes. We were still playing our game of when it doubles, we'll sell. And we saw this as our retirement. That was the investment that we were making. But we also were hit by the 2008 housing crisis. Our 2 sons were grown and had gone through college. My mother, who lived with us for 12 years there in Roswell, had passed away. And we had a house that was almost 8,000 square feet. And our mortgage was $5,000 a month. And we saw that we were 2 people who didn't need this home anymore. We were almost 60 years old, and we decided it's time to retire and buy property in the country. Well, we started out looking at foreclosures. We're continuing to work, and we went through the process of looking at foreclosures for a very long time. We thought this is what we can afford, and this is what we should do. And we looked for a long time, but we never could find the right house on the right piece of property. The property would be great, but the house was, something that needed to be taken down and rebuilt. So with the housing market turned upside down, we suddenly discovered that we were upside down in our mortgage, and we could continue to work, both of us, and keep that house. But what was the reason, for doing that? So we short sold our house, got out from underneath the mortgage, declared bankruptcy, and basically had nothing. But we also had no debt. So we had legally erased our debt and let our house go for less than half what it was really worth. So very sad when that happened, because our future was pretty well wiped out. But we had $125,000 in my husband's retirement account. And we decided that was protected from the bankruptcy, and we decided that's what we had to move forward. So we were on a very strict budget. We were not going to incur any debt, so we had to do our whole project on that money. And it sounds like a lot of money, but when you get into country and you're taking a piece of land that has never been logged, and you're cutting it down, cutting roads, you're trying to put housing on it, you have no septic, you have no well, you're starting from scratch basically, and you have to buy the land. So it turns out to be not very much money at all. But as things turned out, we were able to pretty much, well, we certainly didn't complete our project, because unfortunately we had lived there 6 months and we also had mud everywhere. We had saved cardboard and got it from all the grocery stores and opened up the boxes and covered up all the land with cardboard so we could walk around and not be in the mud. So we also had the big muddy, which Barbara had for a long time. But as things would develop, unfortunately, my husband passed away 6 months after we finally moved to the country.
Yeah.
And that's why the three of us are up here. We represent the group of widows that are building our land in the country. And I'll tell you, it's tough. It is really tough. There are a lot of things that a man can lift and mow and do that a woman just can't do. I don't think I have a feminist bone left in my body. Because I have realized, my own limitations.
Yeah.
And I feel now, as looking back, someone was mentioning that, we learn so much by looking back, how the Lord has led us, through the past. That's really where we see all that we have been taught and learned by those experiences. But I see now that it was really my husband's job to get me to that property, because I would have never had the courage or the strength to do it. Imagine packing up a house like we had, such an enormous property. And of course it was completely furnished. And we sold everything we could possibly sell. Anything that I had left was just something that I couldn't sell.
Jonathan sold the firewood.
Yes, he did. He came home and helped, and it's a long story, but we sold everything we could out of that house. We literally thought we were never coming back to Atlanta again. The little gift cards that people sometimes will give you for, a gift, a present of some sort. We cashed all those in, Home Depot, the department stores, because we were never coming back. And so that money was going to be gone. So anyway, it was a one-way trip for us. So as I say, I think my husband's job was to get me out of that enormous house, get us debt-free, and get us into the property. But when I lost him, I just had a double-wide mobile home sitting on the ground, on the blocks, not blocked in, was tied down, but nothing on that property but cardboard. And no other structures had been built. I had no gardens. Nothing else was started, because when we occupied it, we were going into winter. And our goal was to just make it through winter. We were living on my husband's Social Security check. Mine wasn't going to come in until the next May. So we had one Social Security check, and a most humbling event was we had to call my son in Haiti and ask him if we could borrow $400 to get our electricity turned back on. Now, if you knew our background, that was very shocking because my husband was a doctor at the Centers for Disease Control. And I had a 40-year career, and we were both bringing in 6 figures for most of our life. So now I was to the point where we couldn't get the electricity turned back on. We were freezing. We had a face cord of wood, and we literally counted out the pieces of wood that we could burn in that night. That was it. And then it was to bed, you know, where it was warm. I've had to put back a jar of grape jelly on the shelf because we didn't have enough money. Even after me going to the car and searching through the center of the car for coins, there wasn't enough money to buy that grape jelly, so we had to leave that. We were trying to get peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I've been at the high of life where I could buy and do anything I wanted to do. Drove a Mercedes, you know, I could do literally anything I wanted to do. And I've been at the low where I couldn't afford a jar of grape jelly. So you never know what's coming in life. You can think that you're riding high, and minutes later, your health can be snatched away from you, which it was for me. You can lose your spouse, and without God in your life, I just don't know how people make it. I don't know how they're sustained through these crises in their life, but I think it's why we see people committing suicide and, you know, committing horrible crimes, because they have nothing to keep them going or to sustain them in this life. They have no hope. When I look back now, after being in the country for, this is my 10th year, when I look back, it's like my other lives never existed. Nelson, you've sat in my dining room for many church board meetings, and it's like that wasn't even me, you know, that was there. I'm on that country property now, and I know God has given me every single thing that is there. Without His presence in my life, I would have nothing. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed every day. So this is, to me, this time is the time for us to build our faith. We haven't seen anything yet. The worst is yet to come, and it's coming on us very, very fast, I believe. I've been a lifetime Adventist, so I've been able to watch this message develop and grow, and I'm going to put a number to it. I don't think Jesus is coming soon. What does soon mean? When I was a child, they said Jesus was coming soon. I think Jesus is coming in the next few years. I think I'm going to live to see Jesus come. I think Barbara and I are going to live to see Jesus come. And we haven't thrown out one set of sheets or one blanket or one quilt because we're waiting for you. We are ready for you. Everything that we do now is based on the fact, well, we might have 30 people here. So
we've now got the food. We are now into the linens, because we know you're not going to be bringing your down comforters. So we're trying to cover everything.
We have a checklist, you know. We've got bars of soap. That one bar is going to have to last you a while, but nevertheless, you will have soap.
We have our toilet paper. That's the first thing we learned.
Yeah. You've seen fights over toilet paper. Well, we didn't want anybody fighting over toilet paper, so.
So we took it all out of the store.
Yeah, we're one of those. So we've spent a lot of time planning and preparing and doing everything that we could. But boy, I've learned a lot from these two couples. I now know solar is the last thing I need, so I know who I need to talk to. And Barbara is very good with the herbs and edibles and things like that, but I can see we have a lot to learn here. So just by coming to this today, I can see that we have a lot of friends here to help us take the next steps in the next year to get ready for Jesus to come. This is the time to build your physical strength. If you have a cataract, go get it removed right now, because if not, you're just going to have to go through with it.
You'll just have to be blind.
That's right.
Running from people.
It's like this is the time to...
We might need to edit that out of the video.
Uh-oh. I'm being edited again.
This is the time to take care of all your health problems, you know, get that hernia repaired. get the different things done, because I think time is running short for our hospitalization and your medical insurance and all these things. So that should all be part of your preparation to get ready for the next few years. Take care of your health. Prepare in small ways. You know, I always say whenever the power goes out, I don't know if you have power outages where you're living. We had one 2 days ago that was about 2.5 hours. And every time the power goes out, I always think to myself, okay, what if it's never coming back on? What if that was it? Now let's think. What are you going to use for light?
I've got it.
Okay, Barbara, I know you did. Are you lighting
Don't
candles?
tell too many people.
Are you lighting candles? You know, what is your plan? What's the plan for light? What's the plan for fire? Do you know how to make a fire? Can you start a fire from scratch? What if you don't have matches? What are you going to do? Can you make a fire outside your house? Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to set up a fire and quickly start it? Can you cook? Where are you going to cook? Are you going to cook over the fire outside? Do you know how to do that? Do you have the right pot to cook in? Because you can't put your little Teflon-coated skillet, you know, over the fire outside. What do you have to prepare for every single thing that you need in your home to make it through a day? Where's the water if the water isn't working? Do you have water? You can't flush the toilet. You can't keep anything cold. You can't heat anything up. How long do you think you'll last in that environment?
About 5 minutes.
So every time the power goes out, ask yourself, what would I do now if it's never coming back on? And you can start small, making those preparations for those types of things that you are doing something, taking an active part. I believe you have to put your foot in the water. You know, it's time. You must put your foot in the water. And you must think about what is coming and how can I get ready. I had Moses Mason was a man that some of you may know and have heard of him and gone to his seminars. I spent several camp meetings with him. And you know, his great motto was get ready, get ready, get ready. I have that on my refrigerator. To think every day about how I can be more ready. And part of that, of course, is your tremendous study of the Bible and know what the Word of God says. Be ready to defend your faith and to tell others and explain others the three angels' messages and your belief. Why do you keep the Sabbath? If you had to explain it to someone right now, could you do that? It's important, as more important than knowing how to start a fire. We'll help you with that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome.
I was a Pathfinder director, so I don't know if that helps, but it certainly did help me.
Well, thank you, ladies. We have one final speaker, but I think I'll share my story really quickly. Well, many of you know Andrew. What you saw here, he was that way at home. He was very even-toned, not very dramatic. I was more of the dramatic and, oh, let's do these excitable things. He was the one that brought me to Georgia. He had a big-time job, lawyer job in the high-rises in downtown Atlanta. And our first apartment was in Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, right down the street were certain places where you shouldn't go. We were very close to those sorts of places.
Sodom.
Yeah, Sodom. And I remember telling Andrew, we got to move out of Sodom and Gomorrah. So for us, moving out of the city meant moving to Marietta, which that's, I guess, still the city, but for us, that was a big improvement. And so we moved to Marietta. We lived there about 5 years, and my very even-toned, non-excitable husband in the year 2020 had this sudden idea that we need to sell our house in Marietta and move to the country. So that job was assigned to me. I think I looked at every single property, every single house I looked at, and I had this idea in my mind that, if we're gonna get out of debt, then that means we have to buy land at a certain price to build at a certain price. And I had all of these intelligent, super smart, and I thought, barn dominiums are kind of cool because you just build the structure and that's pretty affordable, and then you can do. The problem was the banks don't really know how to estimate the value for those kinds of structures. So even though in my mind that might have been a great way to get out of debt, I don't think there's a lot of those in Georgia. So they weren't too excited. And I remembered feeling extremely frustrated. Now, Roberto shared that it took you guys, 15 years? Well, for me, a year of searching seemed like 100 years, because when you don't see the end, and it is a test of faith, I remember feeling so frustrated, and my sweet husband was so patient, and Kayleen, when God opens the door, we'll know. So every decision, every house we went to look at, we told God, if this is the house, open the door. If it's not, shut it. Well, we would always have a house scheduled to go see it, and every time we're about to go see it, it's sold. And I just remembered feeling like, God, you want us to move, we're trying, are you gonna find us a property, we'll move. We eventually found a property, and one of the criteria I had was I wanted to be close to the Chestatee church. Specifically to the Koliatko family. They were very helpful. You ladies brought up that it's so important to seek counsel. What does a couple of millennials know about country living? Andrew was born in New York. I'm from the island, so maybe I know a little bit, but he grew up in Tennessee. And if you ask Andrew's dad, he was not very hands-on with carpentry, and he was a lawyer, that's what he did. And so we were about to embark on a country living journey, and we had no idea what we were about to do, but we were going to do it. And the Koliatko family were they were very instrumental in encouraging us. And when we finally found the property that I'm currently living in, all the doors were open. We made an offer, and within 6 minutes of them accepting our offer, someone made a higher cash offer. And so it was too late. They already accepted our offer, so we knew that that was a confirmation. Within 2 months of being there, as many of you know, my husband, it seems as if he was commissioned to move me to Dawsonville. During that 2-month time, it seemed as if we knew we were on a clock, because I had the biggest honey-do list of interior renovations, and he completed every single one by the time Christmas came around. We moved in October, and we were there for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we had a wonderful time there with his family. Anyway, long story short, when he passed, I remembered sitting in my dining room, and this is after things have settled down and all the visitations have quieted, and I remembered sitting like, okay, God, you moved me to a 3.5-acre property. I've never turned on a lawnmower. I don't know how to use a weed whacker. I don't know. Andrew kept telling me to pay attention to because he would start the fire in the wood stove, and he was like, you need to pay attention so that you would know how to do it. I'm like, oh, you do it. Us women, we take a lot for granted, and I have to say I've been humbled. I, I do appreciate his love and his sacrifice. And it does seem that every time I turned around when there was some catastrophe on the property, I'm like, how am I going to get this solved? Within 24 hours, it was solved. I remember a Sabbath coming home from church. Sun is out, blue skies, not a single cloud, and a huge tree is across the driveway, and the neighbors are gone. And another neighbor who I didn't get to know right away, I got to know him. Now he's over and he's trying to chop up the tree to move things around so that I can drive up to the house. And here we are talking about things of God, and I found that every neighbor that had to come help me with something, including my basement flooding, if Andrew was here, of course he would be able to take care of it, but now I have all these opportunities to talk to neighbors and to create friendships. And I want to have a good report when I get to heaven and I see Andrew again. I want to show him all the things that that we had dreamt about doing. The Koliadko family had come to see us this Saturday night. You guys were about to head to Michigan. Was that the first round, or were you guys visiting?
That was right before Christmas. I mean, right after Christmas.
Yeah.
After they'd been for 6 months.
Okay, they were already. Okay, so I remembered, and this is a little vulnerable to share, but this just goes to show that our plans may not be his plans. And I remembered asking the Koliadko family, like, how do you know when it's really time to have children? And I remembered we had a beautiful worship that Saturday night, and then that Sunday, Andrew, who was not, he had learned so much in the 2 months he was there. He was outside chopping wood, and it was just we had started a new life, and then he went to sleep in the Lord that night. And that night, we went for a walk before we went to bed, and we talked about all the bedrooms in the house. I think we have like 4, and then all this space. For me, it can't be. So I do believe that God has a plan, and so I guess I'm also saying that when the refugees come, I am ready to receive. And so I've learned how to lay grass. I'm a landscaper now. I've had an incredible garden harvest. I've planted 50 trees. I'll tell you this, the ground is cursed, but if you have the right tools, now the big augers, I can't, but I found there are tools for us women. If you do enough research, there's a lot of YouTube videos, and if you do enough research, you can learn. And that's the thing, this journey is not easy, but you can learn. And so I want to encourage all of you that it's not the same story for everyone. You may have hopes and dreams, but I believe that when it's all said and done, God's will is best. And I'll just say this one last thing. I was frustrated that the bank wouldn't approve a barn dominium. I thought I was so clever because it would be just better to build. I could design it the way I want. Well, what I didn't understand at the time, and God knew best, is that I would have been stuck by myself with a construction project. And there are many of you, or a few of you here, who know the trials and tribulations of construction. And I think God knows what we can bear. And so he spared me that. Well, his ways are not our ways. And so I'm very thankful that I can share my testimony. It's not meant to make anyone afraid. God won't give you more than you can bear, but he will be with us always. And so that is my testimony. And I want to share a final scripture. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't lean in your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and then He will make your path straight. He will direct. I guess my takeaway for all of you is there's no manual that tells you how life should be lived. You don't always know if you're making the right decision, but commit to listening to the Holy Spirit and really trust that if a door is shut, understand that it's shut, and you may not always understand why. But continue to trust in the Lord, and He will make your path straight. Amen. You can come up.
Yes, please stand up. Do some stretching. Tap your neighbor on their back. Yeah. You choked me up. Right from there. I didn't know. Yeah, I'm going to try not to. I'm trying to be really short. No problem. No problem. So, I'm David Koliadko, and my family is not here because they're in Michigan. My son and daughter, they're at Andrews University, and my wife takes care of them. So, I gave my testimony almost 10 years ago on us getting out into the country. Now, the story starts back, we were in Virginia. I was, in 2008, I don't know why everything starts in 2008, but... So, it was, we had been flipping houses. I built all my life, and that's how I put my way through our private schools, which are not cheap. And so we were flipping, well, we flipped one house, I should say. It was a duplex. We did okay, and so, okay, let's do this again. So we were working on, we got the second one done, and the people moved in and were going to rent for about 6 months until they got some credit fixed because of the medical issues. They had two handicapped children out of 3. And so we're like, okay, that's fine. And then 2008 happened. And they couldn't pay. I couldn't kick them out, or we couldn't kick them out. And so we ended up turning that house over to the bank. And during that time, I was trained as a health coach, a medical missionary. I can train people to actually get certificates that you can become a naturopathic doctor and, on like that. But when we would go to churches to do seminars, setting up for a seminar is 2 weeks at least prior to the event, and then 2 weeks in the event. So that's a month. And our overhead with those 2 houses were $3,500 a month. And so you think about it, the stress of the overhead was tremendous. My wife prayed this prayer. She said, Lord, I want my husband to work for you, but please give him a salary. Little did we know, my wife, she's Korean. We had filled out all the paperwork for a visa and all this, and so we had gone to do I forgot what you call it, the citizenship thing where yeah, that thing. I forgot. And we went to do that, and it was, I think, 2009, the end of 2009. And on the way back, I mean, too many things happened. We're sitting in the room, and there's like 60, 70, 80 people in there. And we're waiting, and I was impressed. Hey, you're next. Be ready. And they called her next. And I was like, what? Why was I impressed that? As we're driving home, I get a call from my cousin who was down here in Atlanta, who's the IT director for Southern Union. And he's like, David, can you come down here and do a temporary job for 3 months? We need you in IT. And it probably will turn into permanent. I'm like, okay. And my wife was we were just excited. I can't go into the whole story, we're late. But too many things that day were just crazy. And we were so excited. We knew that was God answering the prayer. That evening, now, when God gives you an answer to prayer, what usually comes soon after? Not just trial. No, what does Satan try to? He comes with an alternative. Many times. So we get a call from my wife's mom in Korea, and she's like, hey, there's this job for a teacher. And I'm like, my wife's like, hey, this is good. This is in the school system. It would be pretty high up in their school system. And I'm like, oh, man, we just got this. We know this is God, if we do that. And so we prayed about it, and we were sure that we needed to stick with working for God, because that's what it would be. And so we moved down here. It ended up being permanent. It was January 18, 2010, and by August, they made me permanent. But living in Atlanta, I was a country boy. I grew up on a 100-acre peanut farm. I mean, literally, at 3 years old, I was driving a John Deere B tractor around by myself. My dad would send me off, and so I can tell you stories. So moving to Atlanta, I immediately started looking, where are we going to, And from the office was in Decatur, and to be out in the country from Decatur, it's near the prison on Memorial Drive. It would have been like an hour and a half minimum drive, and the traffic would have been horrendous. I mean, an hour and a half is fine if there's no traffic, but if it's a 30-minute drive that takes you an hour and a half, that is nerve-wracking. You know what I'm talking about. Well, so we had found an apartment about 12 miles. It was in Doraville, and it was in a seedy part of, it was really not, God answered our prayer. It was light and beautiful. We looked out on nature. So there was townhouses that were going to be built, but they never built them. So there was just a little drive, a pond, a waterfall. And so that's what we looked at. There wasn't any houses. So it was like God answered He did answer our prayer for that. And we would go walking, we go early in the morning walking, and when it's still dark and stuff. And so we knew that was an answer, but we didn't know when we were going to be able to move out. And we had been praying. Well, they come to me and they say, David, your lease will be up, and we need to know if you're going to renew or not. I'm like, what? I got 2 months. And they said, yeah, you got to let us know 60 days before. I never rented before. I So I'm like, okay. And they said, next week you got to let us know. So the day before I go into work again, I knelt down and I prayed, Lord, I don't know what to do, but here's what I'll do. I typed up a letter and I signed it saying I'm not going to renew the lease. And then, because if I don't say anything, it renews. Then I laid it down and I prayed, Lord, you got to make it clear that it's time for us to move out. You got to make it crystal clear, because you answered our prayer for this apartment. It was an answer to prayer. We had been going through everything, and I left it with the Lord. The next day I go into work, and about lunchtime, my boss, who's my cousin, comes in. He's like, you never guess what the executive committee voted. And if you know what the executive committee at the union, it's made up of people in the 8 states that we serve, of our church, okay? So there's a lot of people that come together. I didn't even know what an executive committee was, but he came in. They voted to move the office from Decatur to Peachtree Corners, 22 miles. And I was blown away. I literally prayed this the night before, and I was like, this makes so much sense. Now, we're able to leapfrog from Peachtree Corners. Up here is, 20-minute drive. It's, well, maybe 30. 20 when you get to exit 13. If you take exit 13 straight down, it's 20 minutes. And so I was like, wow, that's amazing. So I started figuring out everything, and so we decided that we were going to not move out too far. My wife, mainly, she wasn't ready, and her sister was here from Korea with the kids at Atlanta North, and so she was in an apartment right next to us. Well, we started looking for an apartment. For a house or someplace. There was nothing. So we're like, okay, we got to find an apartment that we can then look for a place. Get out first and then go the rest of the way. Couldn't find anything. And one morning we were listening to a sermon, and I don't remember who was preaching what, but we were listening to a sermon, and the Lord convicted me in my heart. I could just feel it. We need to get out. We just need to go. Well, my wife hates camping, and I don't know, maybe none of you are like that. The camping, the bathroom, all that is just like, my wife hated public toilets. And so after that, she said, we just need to get out. After that sermon, she was convicted. She said, we just need to make a little place. Even if we got to have a hole in the ground, we just need to get a piece of land and get out. And I was like, wow. Just like that. So God can change us just like that. No, she doesn't like public bathrooms still, but you know what I'm saying. For God to convict her to do that, it blew me away. So we started looking, and long story short, we moved to Cumming and started looking. Our criteria, our kids were 9 and 11 at the time. Our criteria was all 4 of us had to love the land. We had already looked at a couple houses, and they were filled with smoke, and we're like, we had to rip everything out and start over to get it out of the HVAC system. It would have been, you know what I'm talking about. And we couldn't deal with that, so since I've built all my life, well, let's build something. And we didn't have money either. We had $2,000 in the bank when I said we're going to move out. And my wife came in right behind me and said, okay. And she saw me moving by faith. So it was the dumbest criteria. All 4 of us got to love the land. And that is the sign that that's a stamp from God. That's dumb, right? Because you could literally have 15, 20 pieces of land that you all love. Well, then how do you discern? How do you know? You know what I'm saying? It didn't make sense. But to us then, it made sense. I don't know why. One Friday morning, I found some land, and we went to look at it one Friday morning. And I had the map of the land. You know how usually they show you. And I'm at the cul-de-sac, and I'm looking, trying to figure out where the line starts. And my family went on down the hill. There's a little creek there. And I'm there for probably 5 minutes, and I gave up. You know, GPS doesn't always work too good. And I catch up, and my wife turns to me, and she said, "This is not it. There is no way this is it. Why did you bring us here?" And I'm like, okay. I didn't even say anything. And I'm like, well, let me at least look. And immediately I prayed. My prayer was, Lord, I don't know if this is it or not. But if it is, she's all yours. I don't know of you married guys here, know when your wife is adamant about something, how long does it take you to grovel to get them to change their minds? Literally. So, my son and I walk up, and it's all wooded, and we go up and start looking, and my wife and daughter go that way, and I didn't say another word. Not one more word. We look, and we came back together in a circle, and we're praying in 10 minutes, literally 10 minutes, praying and thanking the Lord. I didn't speak another word. But from her side, she heard all kinds of quotes, text, sermons. The Holy Spirit was just bombarding her in that 10 minutes. So, our criteria of all four of us got to love it came into play. That dumb test worked because we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that was it. So I don't want to go into further. If you want to hear the full testimony, and there's lots more, I preached this back. It's called Get Ready, Get Ready. You probably heard it. I think few of you have. One thing that we learned was perseverance. He didn't give us a level piece of land like Jason. Why? Because he knew 4 of us needed character development, apparently.
Is that why I don't have level land?
I'll tell you, we have learned so much. And the first year, we would plant and get tremendous results. Then, blah, nothing. So 2013 was when we moved out. Okay, March 1, 2013. And we had garden, we had tomato, we were putting up tomatoes, we had tremendous heirloom orange glow watermelons. 1 year, so it's like first year we had wonderful tomatoes. The next year we had wonderful watermelon. The tomatoes didn't do good. And it was just like all these different things happened, and it taught us a lot. We've learned a tremendous amount. One thing that Georgia soil is clay, which is good for retaining or holding the nutrients, and so it's not like sand, but it is devoid of organic matter. And last fall, we I got organic compost and brought it in, and then this last summer, my family's like, oh, don't plant anything, because we're going to go back to school, and then what are you going to do? You can't harvest it by yourself. That's what they were telling me. Then my neighbor calls me up and says, hey, we want to know if we can plant some tomatoes and plant them in your soil because we know it's good. This was before we knew it was good. They just, I shared with all my neighbors. So when we had the orange glow, I took a huge wagon load of 30-some watermelon and went door to door with my little tractor and giving them away watermelons, potatoes, so it is, we wanted to help the neighbors, right? And I told my wife, and she's like, "Oh, don't have them do it. You just get some and plant them. Get 6 or something like that." I'm like, okay. So I planted 12 collard greens, 6 tomato plants, different kinds, and I planted a row of beets, which never worked. Every year that I've tried them, they're just nothing. And mind you, this was after the compost a year ago, a year and a little bit. And so last summer, we were eating beets. I mean, the tomatoes went up to, I think it was 8 to 9 foot. I know I can reach 8 foot, and it was above that. And it was just amazing. And we started picking the collard greens in May when they got home, and we were picking them every week. Every week, we would get enough for 2 meals. Now, we eat a lot if we eat fruit and veggies, we eat a lot. So, because teaching health, that's what, you eat good stuff, right? And we were doing that consistently. The collards grew up to like this tall. Wow. And so it was this like root looking, or I don't know, tree looking thing, and it just, stalk. And so you learn from these things, but we did determine that we did everything to the soil that we learned. I mean, we studied a lot. We have books. My kids went through it. Everything was just mediocre or subpar or didn't work. And it was very, very discouraging. But then when we put the organic matter in, that is what we were missing the whole time. We tried chips. We had 7 dump truck loads of chips, and we tried to compost them and tried to put them in to give organic matter. No. So you went and got the compost from that place. But this place supplies compost to farmers. So if farmers are buying it, it's got to be decent. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. You got a truckload. So one thing, you need to know the reasons why you're moving out. I preached a sermon not too long ago, and it was on, I don't even remember the name, but it wasn't long ago. Yeah, because it goes through the biblical reasons why we are to be out and being able to sustain ourselves. Because Revelation tells us that there is coming a time of no buy, no sell. And it will be enforced, right? So this is biblical. This isn't, our whim. This is biblical. And so go back and look that up if you got any questions on the biblical reasons why. What you need to make is a list. So you saw the quote, which was, there's going to come a time when we can't buy or sell, and grab a piece of land where you can grow your own what? Provisions, because the time of no buy, no sell will be a very serious one. The Bible's clear of that, right? You need to make a list. Okay, so we're going to start making a list together, at least the first few. What is the number one thing to survive as a human? Well, air, but second is water. Water is going to be foremost. If you don't have air, we're all going to die anyway. So, water.
Is that air conditioning?
We didn't put air conditioning in our home. The second thing, what would it be? Food, right? You can live without shelter, but you can't live without food, or at least not very long.
I would have said fire.
Fire? Yeah, but we're in Georgia. You could survive. It wouldn't be pleasant. You need clothes, obviously, but you know what I'm saying. So, water and food. The third thing would be shelter. Okay. Now, in 2020, the 5 in my department, we are having a meeting, and they're like, David, we see things happening. What do we need to get ready? I'm like, well, water and food, make a list. And I said to them, point blank, the only other thing I stated was, and make sure toilet paper's on the list. 1 or 2 weeks later, there was no toilet paper anywhere. So make a list. It's not about, we're not preppers. We're looking forward to Jesus coming. We know these things will take place. When the world says what is good is evil and what is evil is good, you know we're close. Because is that what they were saying in Sodom and Gomorrah? We're there. Literally, you cannot speak. In fact, we have churches that are being shut off YouTube because they plainly read texts. We have conferences. Okay, you all know what a conference is. So this is a church. The conference is the Georgia Cumberland Conference, which is over Georgia and some of Tennessee churches. We've had, not them, but we've had conferences get their, Facebook? Yeah. Facebook, the social media shut down because of merely stating things from the Bible. So, do we see good being called evil and evil being called good? We do. So make that list. Now, I'll tell you that God was a little different with us. So after we saw that land and we prayed, we went, because we didn't have money. We hadn't quite sold our house in Virginia, and we went and we decided that we were going to get things and put it into storage to prepare. So if we find something cheap, off of Craigslist, because Craigslist was really, back then, it was being used a lot. Now, I don't know, something happened to it, but we went and we bought 30 windows for $1,000. We went and put them in storage. We had leftover windows for the house. Then we went and found cabinets. Our kitchen cabinets we paid $438 for. And some of you have seen the cabinets. Solid wood, plywood, nothing compared to what you can get at Home Depot. Because later we had to buy 2 vanities for our house. And we went to Home Depot and tried to get, and it was junk. So God, He gave us miraculously and sustained us and encouraged us. We will learn step by step. Make the decision and just start looking. He will lead you from step to step. That's what we're promised. If you don't, when they crossed the Jordan, what did they have to do first? Step. All the way to, until you, that's pretty deep. But really keep it in prayer. So to wrap up a few things, I live in Lumpkin County. I went in one time with my tax because I got behind the first year, and so I ended up having to catch up. And later, I went in and talked to the head of the tax, property tax. And we were having a good heart-to-heart, and I'm like, is it possible to pay forward our taxes? It's like, no. And I'm like, well, and I don't even know how I said it. I'm like, well, the Bible is very clear that there's going to be a time when we can't buy and sell, and I just want to make sure that I have a home. I mean, we're debt-free as far as we don't owe a bank. My work actually takes money out, so I only owe my work. So when things happen, they're going to be in the same boat as me. I mean, if you know what I'm saying. But they're like, oh yeah, I wondered about that too, and they said, well, you can write to, I don't know, senator, I forgot. It's been a couple years. But they said that after the first year, if you miss, then they basically give you a year of grace. It's basic. Now, don't come looking after me if it doesn't happen, but we're all going to be in the same boat. Like you said, pay taxes as quickly when they come due. Another thing is when you mix up your soil. So we're counseled to plow deep. We tried. I mean, maybe this will work some places, but we're told in inspiration that we should plow deep. There's reasons for that because you're flipping over the bacteria and the microbials and all of that. You're flipping it over. We tried putting the chips on the top and planting and stuff, but the problem is the carbon actually starts pulling nitrogen out. And so you can pull the nitrogen from your plants. So that's one reason why grass clippings are very good composting, because you have the balance there, the carbon and the nitrogen. We were working on trying to get the land here, our community garden, done. And the aim was to get the compost there, spray it with this mycofungal thing. So my niece and her husband are certified organic farmers. They up in Michigan, and they deliver to farmers markets, Chicago, everywhere. And they counseled me on what to do here. So the plan was to flip it over and then plant a cover crop. And I think it was winter rye and hairy vetch. I think that's what. And so I have actually all the seed, but we never could get to it because of rain, because of many things. So I have it for next year. But something you can plant. So as soon as we plow this under, we're going to plant buckwheat. Now, does anyone know why you would plant buckwheat? It's a fixer, but what else? Yeah, but you're not supposed to let it grow until you eat it. So there's something very interesting about buckwheat. It chokes out. It has this chemical that it sends out that kills everything around it. So when the seeds start growing and buckwheat is there, they all die. So on the surface, what the weeds were coming up, I mean, it's not totally exact. I mean, this is what farmers do. And then after it grows up to a certain height, then so you don't want to till it so much as just knock it down. You can crimp it, you can roller crimp it, or you can mow it, and then you let it, and then try not to till more than a couple inches of soil. Just loosely. The reason is because you're going to bring all the seeds up. Does that make sense? Yeah, well, the weed seeds, yes. So buckwheat, deer, I have dealt with a lot. So even before more than 10 years ago, we planted stuff, including sweet potatoes, which deer love the leaves of sweet potatoes. And I had a little thing that would send out these noises, and they didn't touch it. And literally we're all trees, and we're clearing the land, and here's the sweet potatoes, and they're growing, and the deer aren't touching it. But it was battery operated, and then when the battery died, they came. So, but what we're doing here is what we call a Gallagher deer fence. It's an electric fence which utilizes a 3D effect. Squirrels is another thing. You pretty much need a dog if you're going to keep squirrels away. And then, yeah, it's hit or miss. There's a lot of things I could share with what you can do practical, because I've done it, I've learned it, and let me tell you, there's a lot of mistakes. But like I said, God put us there for our character development. Gardening is for, well, I preached this before, the education that God gave us, I mean, the work that he gave us to do before sin was gardening, tilling the soil, adame, if you remember that. So get your hands in the soil. If you don't like gardening, or you think you have a black thumb, or what does Lisa say? 2 black thumbs? Yeah. Just be persevering. You know, this week was trying for me. I had to persevere because there's a pile of, what do you call it, brush, trees, whatever else, and I have to get it gone.
Not dry, green.
It's green. It's a month green. And I kept trying. I mean, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And Michael came yesterday morning, and he's like, David, we just need to hire a professional, get them in here. You're wasting your time. You're wasting, you know, we're just. And so I started praying. I'm like, Lord. Yeah. So I'll tell you, Michael. Your wife is right. No. I started praying. I'm like, Lord, if you don't get this thing burned up, Michael's right. But I kept persevering, and you know what? More than half of it burned up. I mean, literally, I saw it disintegrating before my eyes. I would put my blower on. God kept telling me, do this, and I kept trying. And then I would go get some water. I'd come back, and I'm like, where did it go? And it just kept shrinking and shrinking. I mean, it was like this, and then it just blew me away. So really, it didn't start until noon yesterday when I got my key to my tractor, which I left the key at home, so I had to go. Anyway, noon, and then I started, and by 3, half of it was gone. Literally 3 hours. So I know God wants us to persevere. I know he wants to teach us patience, but how can he teach us patience if he doesn't put us into some squeezes, right? We know Jesus is coming soon. All the signs are there, are here, are everywhere. People that don't even believe in God are preparing. And they're even preparing so that they can help others because they are not prepared. Now think about that. We are definitely getting close, and whatever you do, don't do it quick. I mean, don't do it too quickly, but do it with a persisting and with a goal. You know, the pastor preached this morning, and he said, I don't go as if I don't know what the goal is, or what the exact words. You know what I'm talking about? That flaileth. We know our goal. We know what we got to do. We're not running the race like we don't know where the goal is. We know the goal. We just need to persist and get there. And we're here to help each other. What I've learned, what all of us have learned, what we're sharing is just a little piece. Put it all together. So I don't know if, I guess I'm done. No.
Yeah. Thank you, David. whatnot. With this project, maybe like myself, who, yeah, I have black thumbs and everything dies. I hope everything won't die out there because I'm helping out with it. But, you know, I'm learning a lot, and I'll continue to learn a lot as we go. So if you happen to be in that boat and you can relate to that, then I'm all in. So come on.
So here's the thing.
He's willing to take his time.
What we have here is 1.25 acres that will be inside of the deer fence. Now, the reason we're doing this is to help the community. This isn't a Chestatee church thing. I mean, it is, but
Right.
it is.
But the community is getting very excited about it, and we need to close this down in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to
Okay.
give you a time frame there. However, can you just give a brief idea of the amount of stuff that we already have ordered and are planning on putting in the ground?
So we're putting the deer fence, and it will enclose 1.25 acres. We're about just under an acre that we will put in actually ground, where I already have 10,000 organic sweet corn seeds. Now, one sweet corn will have 2 ears. That's 20,000 ears of corn.
Remember we were talking about the seed swap? That's a perfect time. We have a big corn roast and invite all the neighbors to, let them know that we love them and we love Jesus.
And we're doing the old-timer way of planting green beans in the corn rows at just the right time so that after you pick the corn, the pole beans actually use the corn. I don't want to get out there with sticks. I mean, we're trying to make this as... I don't want this to be, after you plant it, I want to be, hey, let it go. Let it do what it needs to do. Yes. So we have all this worked out. So that's about 15,000 square foot of corn.
Wait. No, we have a plan worked out.
We have a plan worked out.
But, the workers are few.
And the harvest
so
is plenty.
as we go in, we recognize that we're going to have a huge harvest. So if you want part of that harvest, volunteer. Talk to him. So in closing there, unless you had something specific, because I'm trying to shut you down because I'm going to get in trouble.
A bunch of Orange Glow, which are heirloom, tremendous watermelons.
Melons? Go ahead, just list them off.
Beets. We have the baby limas. I have a bean sheller, which my dad made. So you can take beans and literally shell 2 gallons in 30 seconds.
And I even forget the terminology, but we're kind of preparing these ahead of time right now before they go in the ground with some stuff that you were showing us, but I don't know the terms because
so we're gonna.
I'm a failed farmer. We're
gonna do a lot of stuff, and several of us have tractors now, and we're going to be doing that. And I need to come to your house and plow your garden. We need to. Yes, it's raining tomorrow.
Oh, yes, when we do this, we're definitely going to have more things available on Sundays, or some will come in the evenings or things like that. However, we'll get to some of that detail later. Right now, we're just trying to get it where it's the basics ready to actually go forward. So,
and we are going to let people in apartments or wherever around them to have their own
3-minute timer.
Whatever size, like 10 by 20, where they can plant. We're supplying everything, the tomato plants, the cucumber plants, where we have the seeds for that. So we're going to grow them in the greenhouse and then let them plant.
The church has invested some funds towards that. So we'll receive any donations. However, a lot of the stuff is already planned to go forward. Now I want to read something from Proverbs 19, starting in verse 20. Listen to counsel and receive instruction, that you may be wise in your latter days. There are many plans in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord's counsel, that will stand. For us, I read again and again in the scriptures and also in Mrs. White's writings, but there's something that I was looking for, and I found it. I was like, where is that? There's a quote somewhere, an Adventist home, the Adventist home. It says, with a piece of land and a comfortable home, wherever possible, it is the duty of parents to make homes in the country for their children. Fathers and mothers who possess a piece of land and a comfortable home are kings and queens. Do not consider it a privation when you are called to leave the cities and move out into the country places. Here, there await rich blessings for those who will simply grasp them. And with that, I was going to ask if you had any closing words before we have prayer. There. All right. Did my job. There we go.
Thank you, David.
Well, thanks for hanging in with us. It went a little longer than we planned,
Yes,
but we do
thank
hope
you.
it was a blessing.
It's not on?
It's on.
Yeah.
You're on.
I'm just quiet.
So there's a lot of information. Obviously, that's why 3 hours, it's just touching the tip of the iceberg. And so we look forward to future workshops where we will have less speakers, but hopefully more detailed information. And this was supposed to introduce those speakers to you.
Yeah.
Jason?
Were you guys inspired? I was very inspired, and I'm just so thankful for all the speakers we have. Now, obviously, there wasn't a lot of technical information. This presentation was designed to let you guys be inspired to leave the cities, as we're called to do, and you know, we'll get into other workshops with gardening and turn our black thumbs green. In the meantime, we have some inspiration. We have books for you to take home. It's Heading for the Hills by Doug Batchelor. If you're familiar with his story, he's got
They're
a great
at the back.
one. So on your way out, grab a copy, and he's got a lot of good information for you as well. Thank you guys so much for coming. We know we've pushed it to the limit, so let's get out of here and enjoy the rest of our day.
Close with prayer.
So we'll just close with the prayer. Let's stand up and pray. I'm sure we're all ready for that. Our Father, we thank you so much for the directive you give us. We give you so much thanks for the testimonies that we've had. We just pray that you inspire us to follow your directive to the country. We pray open doors for us and let your path be seen. And we pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.